Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Harry Potter. I, Uchiha Itachi, become a wizard in the Harry Potter world. Chapter 1. I'm sorry, Sasuke, I can't be with you anymore. Uchiha Itachi, a generation of geniuses in the Uchiha family just disappeared. The body is so heavy. Is this the feeling of death? It seems that I can never return to the Celestial Dynasty. No, where is the Celestial Dynasty? Itachi fell into endless darkness, without time, without space, without memory. On an old bed, a black-haired Asian boy was lying on the bed with his eyes closed tightly. The next moment the boy quickly opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. Where is this? With the rapid recovery of consciousness, Itachi looked at his hands and murmured, I'm still alive. His eyes turned from pitch black to blood red quickly, and after a while, the pitch black eyes turned into blood red, and there were 3 blood-red guyu in each eye that were rotating with the pupils, which was impressively the enviable blood successor boundary of the Uchiha clan, blood wheel eyes. Sensing the change in his eyes, Itachi quickly began to observe his body, and found that there was no chakra in his body, but a strange energy, although not much, but it did exist, and it was this energy that replaced chakra and activated it. Blood wheel eye. After studying this energy for a while, I found that chakra practice has an effect on this strange energy, but the effect is not great. It can only replenish the energy consumed by running the blood wheel eye, and the total amount is still very small. What is this energy? Itachi was very puzzled. After a while, he found that he could not understand this energy, so he gave up and continued to stand in a stalemate with this energy, and began to observe the surrounding environment. Everything in the house can be seen in a panoramic view. A small room looks very old, but it looked so clean and tidy. It could be seen that the room should be cleaned frequently. A ray of sunlight came in from the curtains in front of the bed, stretched out his hand to pull the curtains open, and the sun shone into the room in large swaths, dispelling the darkness in the room. Julian, you're finally awake. The sound of surprise came in. Itachi turned around and saw a little girl running in quickly and hugged him tightly. Itachi was taken aback. The high response nerves and mobility trained in his years of ninja career did not hide the little girl. In the past, looking at the little girl who was about the same height as him, Itachi didn't realize it for a while, and said blankly. Is Julian calling me? Yeah, Julian, what's wrong with you? Have you forgotten your name? Itachi calmed down and pushed the little girl away, carefully looking at the little girl who seemed to be only about 5 years old. Tell me everything you know, said the blood-colored pupils and quickly rotated the blood wheel eye illusion to activate. The little girl was stunned, and said in a daze. My name is Anne Willis, and I am 5 years old. Your name is Julian Willis, and I am 6 years old. You are my friend in the orphanage until now. This is the Willis Orphanage at 77 Welsh Road, London, UK. We were all orphans abandoned here as babies, and you've been comatose since banging your head on a table a month ago. Listening to Anne's words, Itachi had a general understanding of the world. It turns out that this is not the original world anymore. Although there are ninjas in this world, they are just ordinary people, an ordinary world dominated by electricity. Okay, you go out first. After removing the illusion of blood wheel eyes and letting Annie go out, Itachi lay on his back on the bed, closed his eyes and began to think about his situation. Recalling my past, everything I did for the village, thinking of my younger brother, I thought a lot. Forget it, don't think about it. Although I don't know why I reappeared in this world after I died, I don't know why the blood wheel eyes came here with me, but since I appeared here, from now on I will be Julian. Warless, I am not living for others in this life, but for myself. Because of age, my body is still too weak. I don't have the ability to protect myself at all except the blood wheel eyes. It seems that I should train, and the unknown chakra-like energy in my body is also a problem. What can we do about it? Thinking about it, Julian fell asleep. When the afterglow of the setting sun shone on Julian's face through the window, Julian, who was awakened by the sun, opened his eyes and sat up, and found that the unknown energy that had been exhausted due to the use of the blood eye had recovered. Then I began to try to continue to practice chakra with chakra practice. After continuous practice, Julian discovered that this energy is not impossible to cultivate, but the efficiency of cultivation is very low, which is about 1% of the previous life. It's too slow. What's going on? Is it because the world is different? Ignoring the tiredness of his body, Julian got up and got out of bed and went out to find some food to satisfy his hunger. According to Annie's memory, he came to the restaurant, looking for after eating some bread, he went back to the house. After simply filling his stomach, Julian continued to practice. Even if the efficiency was low and the speed was slow, he could increase his strength a little. Julian got up early the next morning to prepare for training. After a night of practice, Julian's poor energy finally increased a little bit, which was equivalent to about 1,000th of Julian's current total capacity. It's better than nothing. Thinking like this, Julian came to the yard of the orphanage and started his strength recovery training. Day by day, Julian has been using this routine of training gymnastics during the day and practicing chakra at night. During this period, Julian communicated with the little girl Anne, and everyone else in the orphanage was psychologically stunned by Julian's blood wheel. Hint: stay away from his psychological hint. The boring training lasted for 5 years. After 5 years of training, Julian's body has undergone tremendous changes. With short black hair that reaches the ears, a height of 1.5 meters, and a stern face, Julian's character of not disturbing strangers is evident. The eyes are like 2 deep spring eyes, as if they will be sucked in at a glance, the whole person looks serious and deep. Julian's magic power storage is probably at the level of a normal Chunin's chakra. Don't underestimate the amount of chakra of this Chunin. You must know that the magic power of ordinary adult wizards is only around the level of Chunin, and the magic power of ordinary aurors is only at the level of peak Chunin or low-level Jonin. And the magic power of Dumbledore and Voldemort is almost at the level of the peak Shadow class. Also, the young wizards at Hogwarts will not learn how to increase their magic power before entering school. The magic power of young wizards grows with age, and there is no need to deliberately practice. Therefore, the magical power of a general little wizard can reach the level of a ninja school student at most. And someone like Julian who has reached the reserve of adult wizards' magic power before entering school is not unprecedented, but definitely unprecedented. After 5 years of training, Julian found that his physical strength has been hovering between ordinary people and genin. Ordinary people refer to the level of normal adult men, while genin is probably at the level of ordinary special forces. No matter how he cultivated, his physical strength was only at the level of ordinary people, which made Julian a little distressed. What's more, Julian found that most of his ninjutsu can't be used. The only ones that can be used are the lowest level of fire ninjutsu, such as How Fireball Jutsu, Fire Phoenix Immortal Jutsu, etc., and it was spit out from the mouth, but launched from the palm of the right hand. This made Julian almost blow himself up the first time he tried to use the How Fireball, leaving Julian with a black face, which made Annie laugh at him for days. Letters from Hogwarts. One morning, Julian was practicing chakra when he heard a knock on the window. Julian opened his eyes and saw a gray owl outside the window pecking at his window with its beak. Strangely, there seems to be something tied to the owl's foot, which looks like a letter. A letter? An owl actually brought him a letter. Who raised Ninja Beast? Wrong. Julian's mind suddenly seems to have a reaction to this picture. It seems that he has seen an owl delivering a letter somewhere, but where is it? Julian, who is used to this ordinary life, suddenly has a feeling that if he accepts this letter, a door to a new world will open. This feeling seems very strong, as if he knows something but can't remember it, like amnesia. Julian calmed down and opened the window to let the owl with the letter fly in. Looking at the owl standing on the table in front of him, Julian seemed to see a trace of humanity in its eyes. The owl looked at Julian and lifted his foot with the letter tied on it. After Julian reached out to take the letter, he looked at the envelope made of heavy parchment, the emerald green ink on it, and the coat of arms surrounded by lions, eagles, badgers and snakes. Julian felt like seeing this badge. It's getting stronger. Julian looked at the letter. Besides the Hogwarts badge, there was his detailed address. Ying, London, Surrey. 77 Welsh Road. Woolies Orphanage, 2nd floor. Mr. Julian Woolis. Julian tore open the slit in the letter and took out the letter inside. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Principal: Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Federation of Magic, President of the Wizarding Association, First-Class Magician of the Merlin-Sir Order. Dear Mr. Woolis, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to study at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of required books and equipment. Semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will wait for your owl to bring your reply before July 31st. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Vice Chancellor. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First year students need 1. 3 sets of plain work gowns black. 2. 1 plain peaked hat for day wear black. 3. A pair of protective gloves dragon hide or similar. 4. 1 winter cloak black with silver buckle. Students may bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are especially reminded that first-year freshmen are not allowed to bring their own broomsticks. Looking at the contents of the letter, Julian was stunned for a quarter of an hour before slowly recovering. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Then the energy in my body is magic power. It seems that I am going to visit this, Hogwarts. It seems that there is something attracting me there. After several years of time, Julian certainly knew what magic was, but this knowledge and understanding only existed in Anne's storybook, and Julian thought these were really stories. But I never thought that magic really existed, and I didn't doubt the authenticity of the letter, because looking at the faint illusion, or magic, on the letter paper, Julian knew it was not a prank. It is said that Hogwarts will give Muggles a little. Magic was cast on the admission letter from the Muggle-born to convince the Muggle-born and his parents that the letter was genuine. He took out a piece of letter paper, took out a quill pen and letter paper, and wrote a reply letter, expressing his willingness to study at Hogwarts, and asking where to buy the books and materials needed on the book list, and how to go to Hogwarts. After tying the reply letter to the owl's leg and feeding the owl some crumbs of bread, the owl was let out. After a while, the owl flew back again, bringing back a letter from Hogwarts. Dear Mr. Woollis, I am very glad to hear from you. We will soon send someone to take you to purchase the books and materials you need in the college. Please wait patiently. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Vice Chancellor. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Putting away the reply, Julian tidied himself up neatly and took out all his savings. Julian worked as a part-time job delivering milk and newspapers while training gymnastics for £4,000. Well, there were also some who robbed the rich and gave to the poor. Robbed for 5 full years, and sent most of them anonymously to the orphanage. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door. Julian got up and opened the door, and found Mr. Woollis, the head of the orphanage, and an old man with a long white beard. Julian, this is the head of Hogwarts House, Professor Dumbledore, and he's here to pick you up at the house. After saying that, Dean Woollis left the room, leaving space for Dumbledore and Julian. Hello, Mr. Woollis, Professor McGonagall must have explained to you in advance. I am here to pick you up and prepare the necessities you need for school. Dumbledore said briskly. Oh, sorry sir, I want to say goodbye to my friend first, is that okay? Of course, I guess friendship is very important to us, isn't it? With Dumbledore's permission, Julian came to Anne's door and told Anne that he was going to a boarding school. The little girl had red eyes and hoarse voice, telling Julian over and over again that he must think about himself and communicate with her frequently. Julian promised Anne over and over again, until Anne closed the door herself, and Julian turned his head bitterly to signal that Dumbledore could go. You have a very good relationship, right? It can be seen that she cares about you. Yes, sir, Anne is like a family member to me. She is my sister, just like Sasuke. Julian added in his heart that after 5 years together, only Annie in the orphanage was regarded as his relative. Although he didn't say too much, in Julian's heart, there is no difference between Annie and Sasuke now. As if seeing the reluctance in Julian's heart, Dumbledore comforted. Don't be so sad, child, you can come back to see her at Christmas, and I don't think you will be away from her for long. Dumbledore looked at Julian slyly, but stopped talking. Okay sir, do I need to prepare anything? Julian asked, getting himself together. Oh, of course, you need to prepare your clothes. I don't think you need to come back here for the next time. I think you'd better pack everything up. However, I think I can help you, so that it could be faster. After saying that, Dumbledore flicked his wand, and Julian's clothes flew into his trunk quickly, and they were all neatly placed inside. It's amazing, is this magic? Julian sighed. Oh, yes, this is magic, it's very attractive, isn't it? I believe that magic will become a part of you in your future life. Of course, we'd better not use magic indiscriminately. The abuse of magic will cause many unnecessary. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Woollis, it seems too early for you to say this now, and please excuse the nagging of an elderly man. Never mind, sir, some good advice, I'll keep it in mind. That's really great, let's go, it's time for us to chase the adventures of the Goblin Lady. After saying that, Dumbledore led Julian out of the orphanage and walked towards Charles Cross Road. In fact, the Welsh street where Julian lives is very close to their destination, the Leaky Cauldron, only 3 streets away. Sir, how did you convince Head Willis that Hogwarts exists? On the way, Julian asked Dumbledore. Oh, Mr. Willis, you have to know that except for a very few Muggle leaders who know about us, we wizards are not known by Muggles, so many of our little wizards from the Muggle world are generally led by professors from the college. To enter the gate of the wizarding world, it's not just a simple matter of taking you to buy the items you need for the school, it's also an extremely important part of convincing the little wizard's family. Magic is so miraculous and charming, I think you will understand Mr. Worries in the future. Okay, Professor, oh, and what should I use to buy it? Professor, you know, I am an orphan, and the life in the orphanage is not very good, although it can solve our food and clothing, but I think well, Dean Willis doesn't have much spare money for my studies. Don't worry about your children. For situations like yours, we have a special subsidy. Although it is not much, if you buy some second-hand textbooks, the subsidy is still enough for you to spend for a year, but the money exists in Gringotts, we'll get it out for you in a moment, so you don't have to worry about it. Ah, Mr. Worries, we're here. In front of Julian was a dingy, cramped pub that Julian probably wouldn't have noticed if Dumbledore hadn't parked there. Looking at the passing pedestrians, no one seems to have noticed this bar. Sir, can't they see this bar? Julian asked suspiciously. There's a Muggle-repelling charm cast on it, which keeps Muggles from discovering the Leaky Cauldron, and even if they stumble across the place, they'll leave because they suddenly remember something important, isn't it funny? After that, without waiting for Julian's answer, Dumbledore pushed open the door of the bar and walked in. Julian nodded speculatively and followed Dumbledore into the bar. Walking into the bar, the originally bright world in front of him quickly turned dark. Julian fixed his body, and because of the blood wheel eye, the scene in front of him soon returned to normal. Julian looked at the interior of this pub that was said to be very famous in the entire wizarding world. As a famous place, this place is like the underground bounty trading market in the previous life, because it is so dirty and broken. A small bar, crowded with a few old witches who looked like those described in the fairy tale world. Some seemed to be knitting something, some were smoking long pipes, and some were using dirty old witches' wine glass drinking something. As soon as they entered the door, the chattering stopped. The people here were all looking at Dumbledore with respect and awe in their eyes, as if Dumbledore was some kind of big shot, which in fact he was. Hello, Professor Dumbledore, hello. A young man said excitedly, bowing to Dumbledore. Hello, Mr. Farmas, Dumbledore replied politely. The young man was as excited as a child who got candy, and kept smirking at them. Hello, Dumbledore, long time no see. An old man who looked to be Dumbledore's age nodded at him. Oh, Marcus, it's been a long time, and you're willing to take your old bones out of your potions room. Dumbledore said slightly surprised. Oh, of course, I have to go for a walk, maybe one day you won't see me. Is this the freshman this year, Dumbledore? Oh, yes, this is Mr. Julian Willis, a freshman this year. Julian, this is Marcus, a very famous master of potions, and his potions can always surprise people. Hi, Mr. Marcus. Julian greeted him politely. Very polite young man, he looks like a good seedling. I refine potions in the potion room all year round, little guy, and I seldom come out and walk around. Since we met, it means that we are destined. This is my latest newcomer. The refined potion is given to you. After finishing speaking, he handed over a small bottle of golden liquid to Julian. Seeing that Marcus was going to present Julian with a bottle of potion, Dumbledore seemed a little surprised and a little curious. Curious why this leader in the potion world is so optimistic about a junior who is about to enter school. Although Julian didn't know what the golden potion was, Dumbledore knew very well that it was an enchanting potion of excellent quality. Enchanting potion has always been a sought-after item in the wizarding world. As its name suggests, enchanting potion is a potion that increases the magical power of a wizard. This increase is not temporary but permanent, and this increase does not deplete the wizard's own potential, so a small bottle of enchantment potion is equivalent to allowing a wizard to have more capital than his peers. As for how much it can increase, that is, it depends on the quality of the potion and the luck of the wizard. But there is also a shortcoming of the potion of enhancing magic, that is, a person can only take it once in a lifetime. Even so, even the lowest level magic enhancement potions are worth thousands of galleons, so there is no market for them, let alone high quality magic enhancement potions. Therefore, it is enough to see how precious this gift from Marcus is. Julian looked from Marcus to Dumbledore, but didn't reach for the potion. Julian wasn't a child anymore, and although Marcus looked casual, he could tell from Dumbledore's expression that this potion must be very precious, precious enough to surprise Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts. He knows that if you want something, you must give it. A stranger who has not met for more than 5 minutes comes up and gives him a bottle of potion that looks expensive. I think no matter who it is, he will hesitate. You don't get rewarded for nothing, Mr. Marcus. I am very honored that you gave me the potion, but we are not familiar with each other when we meet for the first time, and we have only known each other for more than 5 minutes. I really can't think of it. What do you have? The reason is to give me such a bottle of potion that looks extremely precious. Dumbledore, who seemed to have just recovered from the surprise that Marcus gave Julian the potion, said to Julian. Accept it. Marcus is a very famous master of potions. His potion is very useful to any wizard. As for what this potion is, you will know it after you enter Hogwarts to learn potion making. You know, he rarely gives others the potions he made himself. Even for me, it is very difficult to get some potions from him, let alone such precious potions. Dumbledore obviously didn't want to say the name of the potion in a crowded bar. Accept it, little guy. I don't have any other thoughts about you. I just think you are pleasing to the eye, so I simply give you a bottle of potion. As for the effect of this potion, let Dumbledore tell you, old man. Go back first. After finishing speaking, he stuffed the potion into Julian's hand and disappeared. Julian looked at Dumbledore holding the potion, waiting for his explanation. Dumbledore didn't explain much, but walked up to Tom, the owner of the bar. Tom, give Mr. Woolies a room until Mr. Woolies goes to Hogwarts. Good Professor Dumbledore, glad to be of your service. After that, Tom took Dumbledore and Julian to the second floor of the bar, chose a sunny room, opened the door and let them in, and handed the key to Dumbledore when he left. Come on, Julian, take the potion that Marcus gave you here. Such a precious potion is not suitable for running around, although I don't know why Marcus is willing to bleed and give you such a precious bottle potion, but I suppose it won't do you any harm, will it? With a mischievous smile, Dumbledore took out his wand, cast a few spells on the room, and urged Julian to take the potion quickly. However, Julian did not rush to take the potion, but looked at Dumbledore dumbfounded and said, Professor, you haven't told me what kind of potion it is. I can't just take this stuff that I don't know anything about. Oh, I'm so sorry, Julian, please forgive my recklessness and haste, I'll just explain to you what this is. After all, Dumbledore seemed to have calmed down, and began to explain the bottle of enchantment potion. After Dumbledore finished explaining, Julian looked at the potion in his hand and his eyes became hot. Julian knows how difficult it is to cultivate magic power. He uses the chakra cultivation method to cultivate magic power, but the effect achieved is very slow and very limited. If he could take this bottle of magic potion, it would greatly shorten his growth time. You must know that in the previous life, Julian at this age had already entered Anbu, which meant that Julian was at least an elite Chunin at that time. Looking at the current Julian, he can only reach the level of Chunin. The ninja level referred to in this article refers to the amount of chakra, not the real strength. The strength is too weak, and self-protection may not be possible. Julian has just come into contact with the wizarding world, so he is not very clear about the extent of his current strength, but has brought his own strength into the ninja world. It's really great that you can increase your magic power by taking magic enhancement potions without damaging your own foundation. Professor, let's get started, Julian said eagerly. Okay. Dumbledore nodded gently, then motioned for Julian to sit up on the bed and began to swallow the potion. Julian couldn't wait to sit on the bed, uncorked the bottle and poured it into his mouth, then closed his eyes quietly. As the potion went down his throat, Julian felt a warm current flow down the limbs of his body. The magic power in the body is also constantly growing under the nourishment of the medicine, and the speed is very fast, tens of thousands of times faster than Julian's own cultivation. Julian consciously guided this warm current to practice according to the usual chakra cultivation method, and the speed became faster. While Julian was quietly absorbing the potion, time passed without knowing it. It was almost noon when Julian woke up from the practice, and the effect of the potion was gratifying. Julian's magic power had reached the level of Jhanan chakra. Although it is a first-time Jhanan, but directly advanced to a level, the result is quite satisfactory. Feeling the surge of magical power in his body, Julian's eyes flashed with joy, but it was quickly suppressed. Dumbledore looked at the child in front of him who was delighted by the increase in magic power, and his thoughts went back to more than 50 years ago, when there was a boy as good as Julian. They are so similar, whether it is the origin, the polite way of dealing with people, or the incomparable talent, but the boy embarked on the path of seeking power, which eventually led to his own depravity. The kid in front of him couldn't be allowed to make the same mistakes as Tom, he must not. Looking at the boy in front of him, Dumbledore made a secret decision. "Professor, is there a problem?" Julian's senses were so keen that he soon realized that Dumbledore was staring at him blankly. "Oh, of course not, please forgive an elderly man who is often in a daze. How do you feel, Mr. Woollis?" Dumbledore, who reacted a little rudely, quickly apologized and asked. "I feel pretty good, Professor Dumbledore. My magic power has increased a lot. And Professor Dumbledore, please call me Julian. I don't feel comfortable calling me Mr. Woollis," Julian said with a look of discomfort. "Okay, Julian, now that you've absorbed all the power of the potion, I think we can go and buy what you need. You also need to order some robes, which will take a lot of time to make." After finishing speaking, the two of them came to the backyard of the Leaky Cauldron. The backyard was very desolate. Except for a trash can and a pile of weeds, there were only bare and uneven brick walls on all sides. Dumbledore came up to a brick wall and said to Julian as he counted the bricks. "Count 3 up, and 2 down, all right, stand back Julian." The bricks Dumbledore knocked on began to turn rapidly, and receded quickly to the 2 sides. After a while, an archway large enough to allow 2 people to pass side by side appeared in front of them, leading to an ancient street that seemed to be full of people. Both sides of the street are crowded with street shops who don't know what to sell. The whole street was filled with the sound of hawking, bargaining and people's complaints. All this appeared in front of Julian very abruptly. Looking at the sluggish Julian, Dumbledore said to Julian gently, "Welcome to Diagon Alley, welcome to the wizarding world." Julian walked into the crowd, looked at the men and women around him, and couldn't help feeling that these people were all wizards. "Julian, we need to go to Gringotts first to collect your grant before we can go shopping." "Okay, Professor," Julian replied briskly. They kept walking against the crowd, and along the way, they heard people discussing the price of potion ingredients, some people were discussing broomsticks, and Julian even heard a wizarding sport called Quidditch. "Professor Dumbledore, what is Quidditch?" Julian asked curiously. "Quidditch is the only competitive sport among wizards. It is full of charm and passion, and of course it is also full of danger. Many Quidditch players will die because of the game. Lost, if it's so dangerous, why not ban it?" "Oh, no, Julian, as I said, Quidditch is a very attractive sport. There is no wizard in this world who would refuse a Quidditch match. It has too much status in the minds of wizards. Taller. There's actually a Quidditch game at Hogwarts, and when you get into it, you'll love it." "Here we are, Julian, Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank." They came to a building higher than other shops. The tall building was made of marble, which was completely different from the architectural style of other shops in Diagon Alley. As if returning from the Middle Ages to modern times all of a sudden, the sudden sense of incongruity makes people feel very uncomfortable. In front of the big bronze door of the bank, stood a strange man dressed as a waiter. He was very short, about half the height of a normal adult, even a head shorter than the current Julian, with pointed ears and wrinkled ears. The skin is like that of an old man. "This is a goblin." "Yes, these are goblins. They are the guards of Gringotts and born masters of alchemy. The alchemy products they refine are very famous, which is as famous as their greed." "Well, it's not quite like me. I think Julian, you're probably thinking of fairies. They're really fascinating, but few people have been able to see them in recent years. They're almost extinct." After all, Dumbledore took Julian into Gringotts. Going all the way to the lobby counter, a goblin who looked very old even among goblins was recording something, and raised his head when he saw someone coming. Yinwan, I want to receive a subsidy from Mr. Julian Willis, and take some things from you, you know, number 713 underground vault. Okay, Professor Dumbledore, please wait a moment. After finishing speaking, he put down the quill in his hand and summoned 2 fairies. Griphook, go get Mr. Julian Willis Grant, and Rollo takes Professor Dumbledore to get something from Vault 713. Griphook turned and left the hall, while Dumbledore followed another elf, Rollo, to another direction. After a while, Griphook brought a leather bag and handed it to Julian. The exchange rate between wizard coins is that 1 galleon equals 17 silver sickles, and 29 nuts equals 1 galleon. After finishing speaking, Griphook was about to leave. Julian hurriedly stopped him and said, "Wait a minute, sir, if I want to exchange Muggle coins for wizard coins." Griphook looked at Julian thoughtfully, and said, "The exchange rate between galleons and British pounds is 1 to 5, that is to say, 1 galleon is equal to 5 pounds. Are you sure you want to change it?" Change. After finishing speaking, he took out a wad of uneven pounds. It may be a little scattered, and it is not easy to count, but the number is still considerable. After that, he handed a wad of pounds to Griphook. Unexpectedly, Griphook did not laugh at Julian, but took the money from Julian with a respectful face. Griphook walked to the counter, handed the pound to a goblin, and said to the goblin, "Lie, exchange this guest for gold galleons." After finishing speaking, he turned around and bowed slightly to Julian, and said, "Please wait a moment, honored guest." After all, he went to work on his own affairs. After a while, Lie, the goblin on the counter, handed Julian another big bag of gold coins and asked, "Dear guest, the exchange rate between galleons and British pounds is 1:5. You need to exchange 4,000 British pounds in total, which is 800 galleons according to the exchange rate. Would you like to take all the gold coins away, or store them in our bank? Believe me, sir, we at Gringotts are the safest place in the wizarding world, no one can steal anything from us." "Okay, keep 100 galleons and save the rest." Julian handed the 2 bags in his hand to the goblin on the counter and replied, "Don't worry, distinguished guest, your choice will not be wrong." The goblin became more respectful. Then the goblin gave Julian a delicate pouch and a silver key. "Dear guest, this is 100 gold galleons, and the key to your vault, please keep it." "Okay, thanks." After collecting the gold coins and keys, Julian went to the hall and continued to wait for Dumbledore. After a while, Dumbledore came to the living room, muttering as he walked, "Gringotts' car is still crazy. Have you got the money, Julian? We should go shopping before the sun goes down." "Okay, Professor." Walking out of Gringotts, Dumbledore took Julian to a gown shop, Madame Malkin's robe shop. Dingling, jingling. The bell on the door rang crisply. "Good afternoon, Madame Malkin, how are you?" Dumbledore asked. "Oh, hello Professor Dumbledore, you are such a distinguished guest. I am doing well recently, of course I am, how about you?" "Not bad, a new batch of young wizards will come to Hogwarts to learn knowledge soon. I am very happy. Oh, yes, this is Julian Willis. He needs to prepare Hogwarts uniforms. Julian, this is Mrs. Magic Gold, and her wizard robes are the best in the entire kingdom." "You praise too much, not as good as you said," Mrs. Malkin said with a smile, and Julian could see that Mrs. Malkin was very happy. Dumbledore smiled gently, then turned and walked towards the door, saying as he walked, "Julian, I'll be waiting for you at the door." "Okay, Professor," Julian replied, turning around. "Good afternoon, Madame Malkin." Julian greeted politely. "Good afternoon, honey, your name is Julian, isn't it? You are a handsome young man, come and put on this robe," he said and put a measuring robe on Julian. Once Julian was in his robes, Madame Malkin began pinning him, measuring him. "Honey, do you want a loose fit or a fitted fit?" Madame Malkin asked as she measured. "Well, I want to loosen it up and make it a little longer, what do you think?" Julian asked tentatively. "Of course, my dear, get your robe in 3 hours, said Madame Malkin when the measurements were over. "Okay, thank you Mrs. Malkin, sorry for your trouble." "What nonsense, you silly boy, this is my job and what I should do. Go, don't keep Professor Dumbledore waiting too long, go." "Okay." Julian replied simply, turned and walked out of Madame Malkin's robe shop. Walking to the door, Julian saw Dumbledore petting an owl in front of a pet shop. Seeing Julian coming out, Dumbledore stopped what he was doing, and walked up to Julian. "How is it?" "It's been measured. Madame Magic Gold asked me to pick it up in 3 hours." "Fine, then I think we can go and buy you a wand now." "Okay, sir." Dumbledore turned and led Julian towards the crowd, and after a while led Julian to a small, old shop. Even on this quaint street, the shop looks very old. The gold signboard on the door of the store has peeled off, and Ollivander, since 382 BC in a well-made wand, can still be vaguely seen on it. A lone wand stands in an old window. "Well, this is a shop that looks very old," Julian said in his heart. Pushing open the dilapidated door, Dumbledore and Julian walked into Ollivander. An old man was standing on a ladder arranging the shelves, which were full of long boxes. Those should be wands, Julian thought to himself, and couldn't help feeling a little curious about wands. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the old man turned around, glanced at Julian, then turned his gaze to Dumbledore and said with a gentle smile, "Oh, Dumbledore, good afternoon. It's been a long time since you came to my place last time. What brought you to this old man like me today?" "Nothing, Ollivander, just brought this little guy here to buy a new wand. Oh, by the way, his name is Julian Willis." "Okay, come on little guy, which hand do you like to use?" Ollivander stared at Dumbledore for a while, then turned to Julian, and finally said helplessly, "Well, the right hand. I am more used to using the right hand." "Stretch your right hand up to shoulder level." Ollivander, who directed Julian, took a tape measure and recorded all the data. After a while, after Ollivander finished measuring the data, he walked to the shelves and began to pick up the long boxes on the shelves one by one. "Okay, let's try this one. It's made of mahogany and dragon's nerve. It's 9 inches long. It's pretty strong." Then he passed the wand into Julian's hand. "What are you waiting for? Wave and watch." Looking at Julian, who was a little dazed, Ollivander reminded. Immediately, Julian waved his wand, and with a bang sound, Julian's vase exploded, and the pieces scattered all over the floor. No, this one is absolutely not." Saying that, Ollivander snatched the wand from Julian's hand. "Come on, try this one again. Sakuragi, the nerve of the Orus snake, 9.5 inches, very suitable for silent spellcasting." Julian took it, and with a wave, Ollivander snatched the wand from his hand. "No, this one is definitely not good either." Then he went back to the shelf to pick out wands. Julian felt so stupid, watching Ollivander stuff one wand into his hand, and then take them away, repeating over and over again, "This one won't work, this one won't work either." Time passed quickly, 2 hours passed quickly. Julian tried one wand after another, and all the wands he tried were piled up on the counter, forming a hill. And Julian raised his right hand to try a new wand that Ollivander gave him, said to be made of locust wood and unicorn tail hair, 10 inches long. As soon as he touched it, Julian felt a little bit of coldness, not prickly, but a very comfortable coldness, like holding a jade stick in his hand. And the magic wand in his hand emitted a burst of silver light, and the silver light gradually formed a silver mist. As if he knew what to do, Julian waved the wand in his hand and raised it above his head. Bursts of joy and happiness suddenly surged in his heart, and the happy memories of the past and present seemed to appear in his mind all at once. The first time he held Sasuke, who was a baby, the first time he made friends, the first time learned ninjutsu, little girl Annie gets a candy smile, and more. Looking at these memories, Julian yelled, "Call God to guard!" as if he knew what to say. As Julian's huge magic power surged rapidly, a more intense silver light spewed out from the wand, and the silver light mist quickly merged together, and soon a beautiful unicorn appeared in front of the three of them. The silver unicorn licked Julian's cheek, and then burst through the shop's door and flew high into the air. A silver unicorn appeared in the evening sky, running back and forth in the sky, just like a real unicorn. And the people who saw it, whether they were wizards or muggles, suddenly felt at ease and relaxed, as if no worries could disturb their mood. Following Dumbledore, who ran out, the three of them looked at the unicorn in the sky and didn't know what to say for a moment. Realizing what he had done, Julian quickly waved his wand, causing the unicorn in the sky to quickly disappear before people's eyes. However, it was too late. Although no one came forward to ask because of Dumbledore's identity, people still cast their eyes on the three of Dumbledore, especially Julian. People looked at Julian with curiosity and amazement in their eyes. They couldn't understand how a child who looked only about 10 years old could use such complicated magic. Dumbledore took Julian's hand and pulled him back to Ollivander, recovering with a wave of his hand, the door smashed by the unicorn Patronus. Ollivander then returned to the shop and began to look at Julian quietly. "Sorry, Professor, I was wrong." Julian, who knew what he had done, lowered his head and apologized to Dumbledore pitifully like a child. "No, Julian, you didn't do anything wrong, you were just too happy, and I don't think anyone can blame a young wizard picking up a wand for the first time." Dumbledore spoke softly to Julian. At this time, following the sound of bang and bang, several figures appeared outside Ollivander's door, and then broke into Ollivander's door. Leading the charge was a stern-looking middle-aged man with shoulder-length shaggy hair that made him look like an angry lion. Dumbledore guarded Julian behind him, walked up to the middle-aged man, and greeted him with a brisk tone. "Good afternoon, Rufus, nice to meet you here." "Not so happy, Dumbledore, tell me who did it, you must have seen the murderer, right?" Rufus said, looking at Dumbledore angrily. "Oh, Rufus, I don't think murderer is the right word." Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. "Not suitable, no, it is very suitable. Do you know how many people saw the Patronus charm just now?" "Muggles within a radius of 1 kilometer saw it clearly. At least thousands of Muggles saw it." "Thousands, this is the biggest incident in the past 10 years, you know, Dumbledore, according to the secrecy regulations, I have reason to suspect that this is an organized wizard exposure operation." "Oh, well, Rufus is not as serious as you said, I assure you that it's not a wizard's exposure, it's actually just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? What kind of misunderstanding? It's illegal," Rufus yelled. "It's actually like this. This little wizard was trying his first wand of his own and accidentally caused a magic runaway. You know, little wizards are prone to magic runaway before the age of 11. Julian was a few days away from turning 11, though, so the Patronus charm was a minor accident." "Yes, I can testify that this is true," Ollivander said in a timely manner, "that wand is made of unicorn tail hair as the core." Dumbledore revealed Julian behind him after Ollivander finished speaking. "Merlin's beard, are you kidding me, Dumbledore?" Rufus looked at Julian, who was only 11 years old, with a face like "you were teasing me." How could a young wizard who has not yet entered Hogwarts use such complicated magic? Besides, the magic power of a young wizard is simply not enough to cast such complicated magic, which requires a huge amount of magic power. This is simply not magic. However, this is the truth of the matter. Rufus, although it does not look like magic, it is indeed true. In fact, before coming to Diagon Alley, Julian just took a potion of enchantment, which was refined by Marcus and the ultimate magic enhancement potion presented to him this morning. Rufus froze when he heard the ultimate magic potion. Just when Rufus was thinking about Dumbledore's words with a dull face, a person walked in outside and said to Rufus, "Mr. Scrimgeour, ask clearly. People around say that the spell was fired from here." Not long after the Patronus charm appeared, the three of Professor Dumbledore also rushed out of the shop. "The last guardian god is that this child has nothing to do with it." Hearing the report from his subordinates, Rufus Scrimgeour immediately recovered from his entanglement, and then said to his subordinates, "Go to the Leaky Cauldron again and ask Boss Tom if Master Marcus has been to the bar this morning and gave this child a bottle of potion." Rufus didn't say the name of the magic potion, because it's better for fewer people to know about the magic potion. Then Rufus looked at Julian and asked, "Is what Dumbledore said true? Boy, did you really take a dose of the ultimate enchantment potion, and what did it taste like?" Rufus asked in as gentle a voice as he could get his hands on. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, Julian was taken aback, then looked at Rufus incredulously, and asked uncertainly, "Sorry, sir, what did you just say?" "Forget it, it's nothing." Rufus, who realized that he had lost his composure, turned and said to his subordinates behind him, "Leave the team, it's just an accident." With that said, Rufus turned around, bowed slightly to Dumbledore and Ollivander, then turned and left. "I'm sorry, sir, wait a minute, don't I need to be punished?" Julian hurriedly chased out of the store and asked. No, of course not. People will kill me if they find out that I've captured an 11-year-old. With a playful wink, Rufus led his men away without even waiting for the man who came out to ask questions. This also led to the subordinate being blocked by the reporters who heard the news, and this incident was widely published by the newspapers, which caused an uproar in the wizarding world. Of course, this is a later story. Julian, who was left behind, messed up in the wind with an embarrassed expression on his face. Can you imagine how embarrassing and funny it would be for a lion to wink playfully at you? Turning back to the shop, Julian bowed his head, waiting for Dumbledore and Ollivander, waiting for their questions and reprimands. Surprisingly, however, Dumbledore and Ollivander did not reprimand him. Dumbledore walked up to him, stretched out his hand to touch Julian's head, and said gently, "Child, you don't have to worry too much about the accident just now. People from the Ministry of Magic will take care of it. But I broke the law, didn't I? Son," Dumbledore raised his voice, "the Ministry of Magic won't give you a hard time for this kind of thing. After all, you're not 11 yet, are you?" Dumbledore said with a wink at Julian. "Professor, just now, was that magic? Why did I feel that I was very happy just now, very happy, as if I have no troubles in my life? Is this normal?" "Don't be afraid, child, this is normal. The spell you cast just now is the Patronus charm. Only people with very kind hearts can use it. Dark wizards cannot use it. If they use it, they will be backlashed by the magic itself. Are you kind at heart, then Julian murmured, thinking about his past life. Maybe I should let it go. "What did you say, boy?" Dumbledore asked. "No, there is no professor, there is nothing." "Then, Professor, will all magic have this effect that can arouse the emotions of the caster?" Julian, who let go of the shackles in his heart, seemed to be a lot happier, and he asked Dumbledore in a happy mood. "Most black magic can change the mood of the caster, making the caster cruel and hateful. But the Patronus charm you cast is not one of them." Seeing Julian, whose expression gradually changed, Dumbledore explained hastily. "Julian, the Patronus charm is a very positive magic that can only be cast with the kindness of the caster's heart. Even so, most wizards can only summon a cloud of light, and only a very small number of wizards can summon a demon with a physical body, patron saint." "Excuse me, Professor, what? To be incarnate, Julian, is to have a physical body, as if alive, and even a little spiritual, like a Patronus that you summon. Such a Patronus can even help you send messages and help you transport objects. So, Professor Dumbledore, why am I able to use this spell? This is even my first experience with wands and magic. I think it's time to ask Ollivander, maybe he can give you an answer." With that said, Dumbledore turned his gaze to Ollivander. Well, Dumbledore, you really are, Mr. Woollis. I've been making wands for decades, and wands look like my own children to me, and I can even remember when I sold every wand in my hand," said Ollivander with a frenzied look on his face. Seeing this expression reminded Julian of a person from Shishao's organization, Xie. Every time Xie talked about his puppet, he also had this expression. Ollivander paid no attention to Julian, who had deserted, but continued. "Although I have made wands for decades, all of them are made according to the method handed down in the family. Although the wands produced in this way are not bad, I am not satisfied. I want to innovate. I want to make a wand that couldn't be made, a brand new wand. So I started to continually improve the way wands were made, and to make choices that no other wandmaker dared to make. Until one day, I made a brand new wand. No matter the selection of materials or the way of making it, it was different from traditional wand making. However, I was not happy for too long, because no wizard could use him. You know, the wand chooses the wizard. After experiencing constant failures, I began to be disappointed, because a magic wand that cannot be used by people cannot be called a magic wand at all. A magic wand that cannot be used by people is just an ordinary piece of wood. He has been stored with me for more than 10 years. I have been looking for a master for him for more than 10 years, but more than 10 years have passed, and no one is worthy of him, and he has never made a choice." Speaking of which, Ollivander paused, then looked at Julian with burning eyes. "Until I met you today, boy. Until you used him, he wasn't truly made today, boy. He chose you because your purity and kindness resonated with him. Son, thank you, you let me know, so I really succeeded, thank you, thank you. As he said that, Ollivander actually cried out, crying out like a child. Dumbledore didn't say anything, just stepped forward and patted Ollivander on the shoulder as a sign of comfort. After Ollivander calmed down, he said in a choking voice, take him away, you don't have to pay any nat, take him away, remember to use him well, even though I made him, but because it can't be used, so I don't know, he has those abilities, but I think this wand must not only have the Patronus charm, remember, Julian, you must remember, it is the wand that chooses the wizard. After saying this, Ollivander didn't look at Julian and Dumbledore, but turned and disappeared into the depths of the shelf. Ah, Dumbledore walked up to Julian, patted him and said, come on, before walking out of Ollivander's shop. Julian stared blankly at the place where Ollivander disappeared, and made a secret decision. Don't worry, Mr. Ollivander, I will definitely not let him be dusted, I will definitely let him bloom his own brilliance. Then bent down and bowed a 90-degree bow. Straightening up, he took another deep look at the shop before turning to chase Dumbledore. After catching up with Dumbledore, neither Julian nor Dumbledore spoke, they both walked in silence. Mr. Ollivander is a respectable man, Julian said suddenly, and walked straight forward without paying attention to Dumbledore's reaction. Hearing Julian's words, Dumbledore stopped in his tracks. Looking at Julian, who was rendered golden yellow by the setting sun, Dumbledore not only hooked the corners of his mouth, but looked at Julian's back with a gentle smile, as if he felt relieved, and murmured, they're different. At this time, Diagon Alley seemed to be painted with a layer of golden yellow, looking so serene and peaceful. Then he raised his footsteps and followed. The two went directly to Mrs. Magic Gold's robe store, and took away Julian's custom-made robes and other required work robes, hats, gloves and cloaks. After thanking Madame Malkin, Julian paid the commission for these costumes, a total of 30 galleons, and then said goodbye to Madame Malkin and left Madame Malkin's shop. Go outside the door and join Dumbledore. It's getting late, Julian, you go back to the Leaky Cauldron first, I won't be with you anymore, I'm going back to the academy, the rest of the books, medicine and pets, you can buy them yourself later, leave the academy nearly 2 more months, and you can stay at the Leaky Cauldron for that time. Well, bye, Julian, and see you at the academy in 2 months. Okay, Professor, see you at the academy. After Julian finished responding, Dumbledore disappeared in front of Julian. Back at the Leaky Cauldron, Julian ordered some food with the boss Tom, and went upstairs with his own things. Lying on the bed, Julian recalled today's encounters and experiences, his eyelids sank, and he fell asleep without practicing magic, and he didn't even hear the knock on the door when Tom came up to deliver food. In the dream, Julian recalled many past and present experiences, including Konoha, the Uchiha clan, Sasuke, that silly Nine-Tails Jinchuriki Uzumaki Naruto, and the little girl Anne, and so on. In the end, Julian dreamed that he turned into a unicorn and galloped in the sky, until he ran to a strange place, where the sky and the earth were gray, and then he didn't know how long a ray of silver light appeared in the whole world. Then the silver light gradually illuminated the entire gray world. After Julian recovered his eyesight, he saw a grassland, and in front of the grassland was a huge lake. The lake was so big that he couldn't see the edge at a glance. Looking back, the grassland can't be seen at a glance. The whole world is filled with grasslands and lakes. Suddenly, Julian seemed to hear someone calling him, and turned his head to look at the lake. Julian suddenly found that there seemed to be a unicorn drinking water all over the lake. The call kept coming, and Julian ran towards the direction of the unicorn, but after running for a while, Julian found that he couldn't reach the lake that was clearly in front of him. When Julian finally ran to the end, he suddenly found that the unicorn, which had been drinking all the time, stopped drinking at some point, but raised its head and looked straight at Julian. Its eyes were soft and gentle, looking at Julian as if looking at his lover. Then the voice rang again, "Let's go, we haven't reached the time to meet yet." After all, a huge force pulled Julian to move backward rapidly. Julian wanted to break free from the huge force, but all struggles were in vain. No matter how Julian struggled, the huge force pulled Julian backward quickly. Kacha kacha. With the sound of broken glass, Julian suddenly opened his eyes, and the morning sun shone on Julian's face. So it was a dream. Julian exhaled softly. He grabbed the wand and stuffed him into his plainclothes pocket, went to the bathroom to tidy himself up in front of the mirror, and then went out to continue his unfinished shopping trip. Julian went downstairs and said hello to the bar owner Tom. "Good morning, Boss Tom." "Good morning, Mr. Willis. Did you sleep well last night?" "Very good, thank you for your concern," Julian replied cheerfully. Tom stared at the cheerful little boy in front of him for a moment. "Mr. Willis, did you encounter any happy things?" "No, what's the matter?" Julian wondered. "No, then why are you smiling like a flower? When you came here for the first time yesterday, you still had a cold face, like someone owes you 10 galleons. Of course, Tom didn't say anything, but it was I who secretly slandered in my heart. "No, it's nothing, Mr. Woolies, would you like something to eat?" Tom asked with a smile, changing his mood quickly. "Well, cut 2 slices of bread for me and pour a cup of hot milk, thank you." Hearing this, Tom waved his wand, and Julian's order quickly appeared on the bar. Magic is really convenient. Thinking that when he was a ninja doing missions before, he ate dry and hard dry food and cold water, Julian murmured alone while looking for an empty table with his things. After breakfast, Julian came to the backyard of the bar again, and opened the door to Diagon Alley according to the method taught by Dumbledore. Walking into Diagon Alley again, Julian prepared the remaining books, materials, and tools in just 2 hours. Of course, before that, he went to Gringotts to withdraw another 100 galleons. Julian bought a lot of books in the bookstore, a total of 100 gold galleons of books, enough to make those little wizards who came to buy books doubt their lives. After finding that he couldn't take away these mountains of books, Julian also showed a feeling of doubting life. "It would be great if there was a scroll of sealing," Julian said with emotion. The kind clerk looked at the embarrassed Julian and said to him, "Sir, although I don't know what the sealed scroll is, there is a magic daily necessities store not far from the bookstore. They have suitcases that have cast the traceless expansion spell." Asking the clerk to take good care of his books and asking where the store is, Julian went straight to the store. After spending a full 50 galleons, Julian bought a suitcase with a space of 100 cubic meters. Back at the bookstore, it took a lot of effort and the clerk to pack all the books into the suitcase. Julian dragged his suitcase to the medicine store with the bookstore clerk's expression of, "Welcome again next time." When Julian dragged his suitcase back to the leaky cauldron, it was already sunset. After moving the suitcase upstairs, Julian washed up and ran downstairs quickly. Under Tom's astonished eyes, he ordered a lot of food, brought it to an empty table by himself, and started eliminate food. God knows how hungry a person who ate only a few slices of bread and a glass of milk for 2 days. In short, after eating the food, Julian rubbed his stomach and smirked under the surprised eyes of everyone in the bar. After leaving behind the 4th incredible legend of Diagon Alley, he went upstairs. In addition, the most unbelievable legend is that a little wizard tried a magic wand in Ollivander all afternoon, but after failing to find a suitable wand, his magic power went berserk in a rage, blowing out the entire Ollivander. It is said that Ollivander cried like a child because of his sadness, and finally even alarmed Professor Dumbledore and the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic. It is said that the murderer has not been caught until now. The second most unbelievable legend refers to the unicorn running fast over Diagon Alley. According to eyewitnesses, the unicorn has a huge magical power that makes all wizards and muggles within a kilometer, as if under the imperious curse, they froze in place, motionless. The scene was strange. The third most unbelievable legend is that it is said that someone bought tens of thousands of gallon books in Lihan Bookstore and almost emptied Lihan Bookstore. According to the little wizards present, "I have never seen someone buy so many books, he almost emptied the Lihan Bookstore." In addition to the current 4th legend, a troll who looks like a little human wizard ate almost all the food in the leaky cauldron, and even drank all the wine. It is said that he also ate several people. As for the shops involved in the legend, none of them came out to refute the rumors, which led to the great fame of these shops in Diagon Alley, and even drove a lot of business. Of course, Julian doesn't know these things. If Julian knew, he would definitely say MMP, if he knew MMP. For the rest of the month, Julian didn't come out of the room very often. Except for eating and occasionally going to Diagon Alley to buy new books, Julian stayed in the room and looked at the books he bought. For Julian who has blood eyes, who knows how fast he can read books. And don't forget, Julian possesses magical powers that rival any Auror's. After seeing so many novel magics and spells, I completely let go of the burden in my heart, and Julian, who has awakened the soul of a bear child, certainly will not let go of the opportunity to try. So in the next 2 months the Leaky Cauldron welcomed the 5th incredible legend in Diagon Alley. Continuous explosions were constantly happening in a certain room on the 2nd floor. According to people, a few radical wizards from the Middle East are planning to launch an explosive attack on Diagon Alley. As for the truth, of course it was Julian who tried the spell in the book. Of course, no one knows why it exploded even though it was just a simple floating spell. So Julian went to Ollivander for a solution, return and release goods. Ollivander just looked at Julian indifferently and said, "The wand is fine." Finally, after obtaining Ollivander's consent, Julian pointed his wand at the vase repaired by Dumbledore, and said, "Wingardium Leviosa." Well, there was no explosion this time, which is gratifying. There was a bang. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't an explosion, but the rapidly rising vase hit the ceiling. "Well, I'm sure the wand is fine," Julian said awkwardly, looking at Ollivander who was drenched in water. "Then, let's mourn poor Julian, no, the vase, let's mourn the poor vase, who knows how many times that poor vase has been blown up over the years by little wizards who came to buy wands." Clutching his ass, Julian limped out of Ollivander. While walking, he complained, "Old man, you are really ruthless." After walking a few more steps, he looked back at Ollivander, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and left with a chuckle. "However, this matter is not over yet, everyone, you should know that this is the kingdom of Ying. Apart from being famous for its dark cuisine, it is also known as the kingdom of rot." Julian didn't know that he was seen by several young little witches when he came out of Ollivander with a limp and a smile. "So, the rotten country deserves to be a rotten country, it's so rotten at such a young age, that's really good. Well, if it goes on like this, it will be extinct in Congress." And then Ollivander went viral, in The Little Witch. This made Ollivander, who was always looked at strangely ambiguously by the little witch who came in to buy a wand, a little confused, but still looked at them with a gentle smile. When finally one day Ollivander could no longer bear the weird smiles of the little witches, he asked a little witch who came into the store to buy a wand. Ollivander, who knew the truth, shed tears, crossed out, and then with a roar, this matter ended. Well, it ended with Julian being blacklisted by Ollivander for life. As Julian continued to read books, time passed day by day. During these days, Julian, who happened to be on the street, met many freshmen this year, such as Neville Longbottom, Hermione Granger, Ronald Weasley, and so on. Well, the one that impressed me the most was the Weasley family. Julian didn't understand how the Weasley couple did it, how the same family and the same environment could educate children with such different personalities. The eldest 2 children don't know what to do, but Percy Weasley's ambition and desire for power, twin brothers George and Fred Weasley's enthusiasm and vivacity. I have to admire the magic of magic. Does this have something to do with the magic of magic? The dull days continued until late July. This day Julian was having breakfast. When he was about to finish eating, suddenly the door of the bar was pushed open, and a huge body walked in. Julian roughly estimated that this person was about 4 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide. This person was obviously Hogwarts gamekeeper, Rubeus Hagrid. The wizards in the bar fell silent when Hagrid entered, all looking at Hagrid. "Still the same, Hagrid?" Tom asked. "No, Tom, I'm on Hogwarts errands to take young Harry and buy what he needs for school." "Oh my God!" exclaimed Tom. As soon as the word, Harry, was uttered, the lively bar became quiet again. After a while a young man came up to Harry and said excitedly, "Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back." The young man acted as if he had flipped a switch, and everyone in the bar rushed towards Harry, and everyone wanted to shake Harry's hand excitedly. Looking at Harry, who was being crowded in the center and being manipulated casually, Harry already showed a confused expression. I don't know why, but Julian had a familiar feeling. He had never seen this boy before, but why did he have such a familiar feeling? He sighed, the hero who defeated the big devil, really welcome. After that, Julian stood up and squeezed in the direction of the two. Harry, who was finally shaken by people, had an expression of "Who am I? where am I, and what am I going to do, and was dragged by Hagrid to the backyard. Wait a minute. Julian quickly caught up and ran in front of the two of them. Hello, Mr. Hagrid. She was called Mr. Hagrid's face was a little red. Hagrid asked, blushing in his gruff voice, "What's the matter, kid?" Harry even suspected he was being shy. Well, Julian thought so too. Hi sir, my name is Julian Willis, and I am a freshman at Hogwarts this year. I have been living here for the past few days. Can I take Harry to buy what he needs? Buy some more books. Oh, you're Julian Willis, that little guy who keeps the ministry busy, so it's you. Julian's little face flushed, and he cursed secretly, the Daily Prophet. So, do you agree? I think you can have a small drink here. Of course, I will pay for the drink. Hearing Julian's words, Hagrid's heart moved, and he looked at Harry and asked, Harry, do you agree? Seeing the eagerness in Hagrid's eyes, Harry nodded in agreement. My name is Harry Potter, you can call me Harry, can I call you Julian? Of course, Julian replied briskly. Here is the key to Harry's Gringotts, you should know how to use it. Hagrid handed Julian a golden key and turned back into the bar. Julian smiled at Harry, drew his wand, pointed at a wall and said, Look, Harry. Then he knocked on those few bricks, and the bricks Julian knocked on began to rotate rapidly, and retreated quickly to both sides. After a while, an archway large enough for two people to pass side by side appeared in front of them, leading to a view go up the quaint streets full of people. Julian looked strange, and said to Harry, Welcome to Diagon Alley, welcome to the Wizarding World, Harry. It seems that someone said that before, I seem to be a guest guide. Julian thought to himself. Julian took a step forward, past Harry to Diagon Alley, looked back at Harry who was still in a daze, and couldn't help urging, Harry, what are you waiting for? I'm not a human trafficker, I won't sell you. Hurry up, follow up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, I thought it was all so magical, until just now I thought it was a prank. I grew up in the Muggle world, so I'm not very familiar with the Wizarding world. An apologetic Harry looked at Julian anxiously, for fear that Julian would dislike him. Looking at Harry in front of him who seemed to admit he had done something wrong, Julian smiled and said, You are too nervous, Harry, the Wizarding world is actually not much different from the Muggle world. Wizards use magic, Muggles use technology, or you can think of magic as wizards' technology. And Harry, I want to make it clear that I also grew up in the Muggle world, and there's nothing shameful about it. Nowadays, many wizards are not pure-blooded, and there are more and more Muggle-born wizards. Besides, you're not Muggle-born, aren't you? Your parents are wizards, aren't they? They're still very powerful wizards. You know my parents. Harry looked at Julian in disbelief. Don't you know about your parents? What about yourself? Julian asked strangely. It seems that this hero is not quite what he imagined. Sorry, I don't know. Harry blushed. All right, Harry, after the scene at the bar just now, you should have a clear understanding of how famous you are in the Wizarding world, right? Julian looked at Harry helplessly. Harry looked a little uncomfortable with Julian's eyes, and he said dryly, You are the second person in the Wizarding world I have contacted. Hagrid didn't say much to me, so I'm not very clear. You can tell about me, and about my parents. Although it felt a little weird to beg someone to tell you about yourself, Harry, who was eager to know his own background, begged. Of course, let's talk as we go. We have to go to Gringotts to get you some gold coins first. Julian told him all about Harry's life experience, of course only those recorded in the books. What? Harry is a hero in the Wizarding world, the hero who killed the great demon king, his parents died to protect him, and so on. This topic was a bit dull, which made Harry very quiet all the way, and Harry's eyes were red when he heard that his parents had sacrificed for him. Until Julian's last sentence, Voldemort's death curse was rebounded for some reason. He didn't kill you, he killed himself, and that curse only left you with a scar. Oh, here we are, Harry. Harry, who lowered his head and touched his scar because of this sentence, subconsciously raised his head and looked at the building in front of him. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Harry said to Julian, holding himself back. Is this cool? There's something even cooler in it. Harry, have you ever been on a Muggle roller coaster? Julian asked playfully. No, Harry stumbled as if startled by Julian's tone. I grew up with my aunt, and their family didn't treat me very well. They went out to play and never took me. So muggle, I've never been to an amusement park. Well, you were really pitiful, but that's just right, you can experience it today. Julian said maliciously, and then walked into Gringotts, ignoring Harry. Harry, who followed quickly, didn't seem to realize what he was about to face, but happily followed Julian into Gringotts. Julian walked towards the counter with ease, and said to Yinwan, who seemed to be busy all the time, "Yinwan, Mr. Harry Potter needs to get some gold coins." After finishing speaking, he put the key Hagrid gave in front of Yinwan. Yinwan checked the key carefully, then looked at Harry, and said softly, "The key should be fine." Griphook took the two gentlemen to get the gold coins. "Okay, please follow me, distinguished guest." Griphook picked up a miner's lamp and walked towards the hole behind the counter. Julian and Harry followed behind Griphook until they walked to the side of the vehicle like a mine cart. Let's call it a mine cart. Griphook got on the car first, and Julian urged Harry to get on the car first, and then Julian followed. Get in the car, because the pull ring is very short, so Harry's line of sight will not be blocked, and the scene in front of him can be seen clearly. After a while, when the three of them were ready, the minecart started to start, racing all the way. Julian, who wanted to see Harry's jokes, found that Harry was motionless as if frightened. When the minecart stopped in front of Harry's vault, Julian leaned up to Harry and said, "How about Harry, is it exciting?" "Oh, it feels pretty good." Harry turned around and said flatly. The scene was very embarrassing. For a moment, Julian felt a flock of crows flying over his head, saying, "Stupid," and "Stupid," while flying. "Mr. Potter's key, thank you." Griphook bravely broke the calm as if he didn't see Julian's embarrassment. Julian, who seized the opportunity, quickly took out the key and gave it to Griphook. Griphook looked at the key carefully, then inserted the key into the door of the vault, and turned it slowly. The door to Harry's vault swung open with a click, and the sight inside stunned Julian and Harry himself. The vaults were filled with piles of galleons of gold, sickles of silver, and nuts of copper. Julian, who was hit by Harry again, seemed to have lost his soul, sitting at the door in a daze, and kept muttering, "I'm a dog now, I'm a dog now." God knows how Julian knew this word, ask Merlin Barr. Harry, who was listening to Griphook explaining the exchange rates between the three currencies, and looking at Julian, who had lost his mind, suddenly had a sense of satisfaction and confidence that came from nowhere. Julian, who had returned from his soul, hurriedly packed a bag of gold coins for Harry, and then got into the mine cart without looking back. Helpless Harry, looking at Julian, who had just been hit by him twice, could only follow Julian's wishes and leave. After leaving the vault, Julian recovered his blood quickly, and rushed to Madame Malkin's robe store with Harry. Walking into the store, Julian greeted Mrs. Malkin loudly, and received a warm response from Mrs. Malkin, which made Julian, who had just been slapped in the face invisible by Harry, feel much better. But when she knew that the thin boy next to Julian was Harry Potter, Madame Malkin's enthusiasm quickly changed to another object. Seeing Harry being greeted by Mrs. Malkin, Julian's world, which was left behind, quickly turned grey again, and the whole person fell into a state of vomiting again. "So, are you Harry Potter?" asked the customer who had been in the shop before. It was a thin boy with a pale face, with pride on his face, his head tilted up like a proud swan. Looking at the proud boy, Julian smiled. How interesting this scene is, isn't it the same as the routine of the novels he read since he was a child, the scene where the villain first appeared. The boy who turned to look at him because he heard his laughter looked at him contemptuously, and said, "What are you laughing at? I'm talking to Harry Potter, you must be a dirty mudblood for being so rude." Before the boy could finish his sentence, he smashed through the door of Mrs. Mojan's store and flew to the street outside as if he had been hit by a huge force. Time seemed to be stopped all of a sudden. Madame Malkin was not worried about the boy who broke through the door and flew out, because Madame Malkin did not think that a Hogwarts freshman would use such powerful magic. The smashed door. Instead, he said to Julian, "You shouldn't be such an impulsive kid, you're going to get in big trouble." "It's okay, Mrs. Malkin, nothing will happen." As soon as Julian finished speaking, there was a scream from the crowd outside. "Draco, how are you? What's going on? Who attacked you?" "You're his mother," Julian asked as she walked out of Madame Malkin's shop, wand in hand, to the screaming woman holding Draco in her arms. "It was you who attacked Draco, didn't you?" The woman demanded loudly and pulled out her wand, intending to cast a jinx on Julian. However, Julian just waved his wand casually to break up the curse that was about to be fired, and with another wave, he knocked the woman's wand into the air and got it into his hands. A person who can casually say something like, "Dirty mudblood, I think you, as a mother, haven't taught him what manners and family education are. What, just because of this, aren't you a dirty mudblood, you dirty mudblood?" Before the woman finished speaking, she flew backwards like her son and hit the wall behind. Rang rang, rang rang, what happened, why are you all gathered here? At this time, a man's voice came over. Hearing the man's voice, the faces of the people around him were strange, while the people in front of the man retreated spontaneously to both sides. So watching the excitement is the patent of the whole world, whoever said wizards don't watch the excitement. When the man saw his wife and son on the ground, his anger surged to his head instantly, and he looked at Julian holding the wand and said loudly, "It's you, they are the ones attacking, right?" After speaking, without waiting for Julian to reply, a spell was fired. But the result was different from what he had imagined. Julian finished complaining, "It's really a family, even the words are the same." Then he waved the magic wand in his hand to disperse the man's magic, and then hit the "expel you" weapon, to knock the man flying in front of the boy and the woman. Julian held 2 magic wands in his left hand, and with his right hand, he said, "Clear water like a spring," and rushed towards the family's face. People around looked at Julian's actions and all suppressed their smiles. Looking at his masterpiece, Julian looked back at Harry and said gently, "A family needs to be neat and tidy. Are you right, Harry?" Seeing Julian's fierce and evil expressions, Harry was smiling on the surface, but in his heart he said, "MMP, are I right?" After finishing these, Julian threw the couple's wands to them, and then took Harry back to Madame Malkin's robe store to continue customizing robes for Harry. The crowd gradually dispersed, and the Malfoy family on the ground, who cares about them? Chapter 11. After customizing the robes, Harry and Julian were caught up and stopped by the Ministry of Magic Aurors on their way to Ollivander. The Malfoys followed the Auror, watching Julian and Harry smugly. "Dirty mudblood, you're out of luck now. Spix, that's the guy who attacked us." The Auror looked at Julian with an ugly expression. "Did you attack the Malfoy family?" Julian gave a very stiff hum, and said loudly, "No." This made the Malfoy family and the Auror look like MMPs. "Director, this guy didn't follow the script, why did he admit he was cowardly? Shouldn't you be the one who said yes, and then asked me to send you to the Azika class?" Malfoy twitched inwardly. "Asshole, it's you, I have witnesses," Lucius Malfoy shouted. "Shut up, Lucius, what do you look like yelling? Remember you are a nobleman, don't you feel ashamed because this mudblood lost his status?" The Auror said arrogantly. "Yes, sorry Spix, I was a little impulsive. Mudblood, come with me," Spix said, looking at Julian contemptuously. "Specs, don't you think you're an uneducated guy too?" Julian said softly. "You dirty mudblood, what are you talking about?" Julian's magic coaxed onto him before the word, "what," could be said. "You guys too." Just as the words finished, another spell was awarded to the Malfoy family. Seeing the 4 of them lying neatly together, Julian drenched them with another spell of "clear water like a spring," and was satisfied. Nodded, "Well, it's still a familiar recipe, and it's still a familiar taste." Just when Julian was still proud, there was a cracking sound all around. Julian hurriedly knocked Harry down, and then only heard curses whistling over their heads. It turned out that the Auror reinforcements had arrived. Just when Julian was about to strike back, someone yelled, "Stop," and all the Aurors stopped releasing the spell, but they didn't put down their wands. And Harry, as the center, surrounded them. "Who can explain to me what happened?" Rufus Scrimgeour's angry voice filled the entire street. "Well, sir, if you want to know what's going on, I think I can explain it to you," Julian began. "Julian, why are you here?" Rufus Scrimgeour wondered. "Sir, after you listen to my explanation first, I think you will know why I am here." Julian then told Rufus Scrimgeour the whole story without adding any fuel. Vinegar, just like that. Listening to Julian's narration, Rufus Scrimgeour's face kept turning black, and Rufus Scrimgeour's face when Spikes and the Malfoy family insulted Julian as a dirty mudblood, it was even more gloomy to the extreme. After Julian finished describing the cause and result of the incident, he looked at Rufus Scrimgeour and said, "Sir, I've finished my description, do you have any questions?" Is what he said true? Rufus Scrimgeour turned around and asked several of his subordinates. Yes, sir, we got some witnesses and Mrs. Malkin to testify, and what they said is basically the same as what Mr. Woolley said. Rufus Scrimgeour nodded, turned around to look at Julian and said, "Don't worry Julian, you'll be fine, I'll give you an account of this matter." "I'm fine at first, isn't it, sir? You know, I'm not yet 11 years old. It's normal for a little wizard under 11 years old to run away with magic power due to emotions, isn't it? After all, I'm still a kid before I'm 11, aren't I?" Julian accentuated the pronunciation of children and under the age of 11. Hearing Julian's words, Rufus Scrimgeour's face twitched. Of course he knew what Julian was talking about, and he wanted benefits. Rufus Scrimgeour cursed inwardly. "You're a child, you're not yet 11 years old, and you've never seen a kid under 11 years old who can bring down 3 adult wizards, among them one is still a well-trained Auror elite. The magic power is rampant, I will go to your magic power and run away, do you think I am a fool? There is also Spix, it is simply hateful, if it is not because you are the child of my old friend, I will care about you go to hell." No matter how angry or unhappy Rufus Scrimgeour is in his heart, he has to get this matter done, otherwise he can imagine how those annoying reporters from the Daily Prophet will smear the Ministry of Magic and the Magic Ministry of Horrors. "Where's Spix?" Rufus Scrimgeour asked angrily. "Horrors, look at me and look at you." Finally, 2 Horrors got out of the way, revealing Spikes who was unconscious on the ground. "Wake him up." An angry Rufus Scrimgeour almost gritted his teeth and squeezed these 4 words out of his mouth. Looking at the furious leader, the Horror, who had a strong desire to survive, subconsciously uttered, "Clear water like a spring," and directly smeared Spix's face. Spix quickly woke up. Before Spix could say anything, Rufus Scrimgeour's scolding sound hit Spix in the face, and Spix was stunned. Rufus Scrimgeour, when Lin Jia started to scold, he even slapped Spix twice, and the crisp sound resounded throughout Diagon Alley. In the end, the matter was settled perfectly. Rufus Scrimgeour made the decision. Spix himself compensated Julian with 500 gold galleons, and the Malfoys paid Julian 2,000 gold galleons. After all, this matter was caused by them of. The Malfoys really wanted to refuse, but Rufus Scrimgeour's lawsuit made the Malfoys speechless. After all, no one wanted to be labeled as racially discriminatory. Although everyone thought so, they didn't. People dared to say this. It is like a layer of window paper, and it will not benefit everyone if it is broken. The poor Malfoy family not only lost a lot of money, but also got a bad reputation. The wizards and nobles thought the Malfoy family was too useless, even an 11-year-old child, well, not yet 11. And the commoner wizards hated the Malfoy family even more, although the Malfoy family didn't care much at all. The disgraced Malfoy family fled home in embarrassment, until the day before Hogwarts started school. They came to Diagon Alley to buy Draco Malfoy's wand and school supplies. However, what is ironic is that when Draco Malfoy went to buy a wand, Ollivander claimed that he did not have a wand suitable for Draco Malfoy and refused to sell the wand to Draco. And when his father, Lucius Malfoy, bought him medicinal materials again, he was told by the clerk that the medicinal materials were sold out. What drove Lucius crazy was that he had seen a witch buy it blindly in front of him. The medicinal materials he needed, but the clerk turned a blind eye to this, and insisted that the medicinal materials were sold out. Lucius finally got angry and pulled out his wand. Before he could recite the spell, he was picked up by several young and strong shop assistants and thrown out of the door. Well, it is said that this awesome medicine shop has the greatest pharmacist of this century, Master Marcus's shares. Draco's mother, Narcissa Malfoy, was directly refused to enter a shop that sold beauty potions. This shop was more direct, and a piece of paper was pasted directly at the door, which said, "The Malfoy family is banned for life. Enter." The shop was the property of an aristocrat who had trouble with Malfoy. The poor Malfoy family was overtly or secretly squeezed out by almost the entire Diagon Alley shop. In the end, the Malfoy family left Diagon Alley again in embarrassment. Of course, this is all for later. The situation with the Malfoy family was different for Julian. Julian, who got 2 bags of gold coins for nothing, almost burst into laughter. He took out 100 gold galleons as a spare, and kept the rest in gringotts. Looking at the gold coins in his vault, Julian couldn't help but thank the Malfoy family in his heart. The Malfoy family are really good people, I really have to thank them very much. Julian said gleefully at Harry. In the end, Julian took Harry to buy all the items on the list including the wand, and bought a snow owl for Harry as his 11th birthday present, and then took Harry back to the leaky cauldron. Looking at Hagrid, who was already drunk, Julian reluctantly found Tom to pay for the drink, and then asked Tom to open 2 more rooms. After Hagrid was settled, Julian and Harry went downstairs to eat something. And Harry, who saw Julian's appetite for the first time, was obviously stunned. He couldn't believe that there were people in this world who could eat so much. After Julian finished eating, he stood up, and Harry found miraculously that not only could Julian eat, but his stomach was still flat after eating so much. Harry couldn't help sighing, "Is this magic? It's really amazing." Julian got up early the next morning. He didn't sleep much after being excited all night because he won 2,500 gold coins for nothing. He was forced to wake up by Harry knocking on the door. Opening the door and looking at Harry with an excited face and thick dark circles under his eyes, Julian's expression was a little confused. "Is he so excited?" Cough, "Harry, although I know you are at this age, you must pay attention to your body. The frequency should not be too frequent. 2 or 3 times a week is enough. Be careful not to hurt your body kidney. Young people don't know how to worry about jing z flavor gway. It's sad to be old, Harry." After hearing Julian's words, Harry froze with an expression of "Who am I, where am I, and what am I going to do?" Julian finished speaking to Harry earnestly, and then quickly closed the door while Harry was still thinking about life. "Well, I did another good deed and persuaded a lost lamb to return." Julian nodded in satisfaction. He was happy to complete his daily deeds. Just as Julian was about to go to bed and sleep, there was another knock on the door of the room. Julian opened the door again, looked at Harry who was blushing outside, and asked impatiently, "Harry, what exactly do you want?" "No, I didn't, don't talk nonsense," Harry said hastily. "Well, it's a classic triple denial, so our savior is so flirtatious." Julian thought to himself. "So, Harry, what exactly do you want to say? What do you not have? What am I talking nonsense?" Looking at the blushing Harry, Julian said with a serious doubt on his face. "Didn't you talk about that again?" Harry blushed even more. Seeing Julian's serious expression, Harry thought to himself, "Could it be that I'm thinking wrong?" "Which one, Harry? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you not staying up too often. Staying up too late will hurt your body. There seems to be nothing wrong with that, or is it Harry thinking of something terrible?" Julian looked at Harry with a smirk and teased. No, what I'm talking about is staying up late, don't think about it." Harry hastily denied and then said hastily, "I came to you to say that Hagrid woke up and was going to take me back to my aunt's house. I came to say hello to you. Individually, by the way, make an appointment to meet at King's Cross Station." "Oh, then you should have said it earlier. Wouldn't it be better if you made it clear earlier? I thought you were doing something wrong." Julian looked like he'd suddenly realized. "Hey, whoever messed up the topic, blame me. I overturned the table. Believe it or not, I pretended to be so similar. Who are you fooling? You, I see through you, Julian. I didn't expect you to be like this, Julian," Harry thought with a sad look on his face. "Sorry, I misunderstood you because I didn't make it clear in advance." Seeing Julian's sudden realization, Harry expressed his fatigue and threw a bunch of MMPs at Julian. Julian, who successfully defended against Harry's MMP attack, didn't care how upset Harry was now. Julian said earnestly, "It's okay, Harry, I forgive you. Actually, Harry, you don't have to blame yourself too much. Everyone has such a young age, so don't take it to heart. As long as you correct yourself, you are still a good comrade of the people." Before Julian finished speaking, the door was slammed shut by Harry from the outside with a bang. The sound of the door slamming was not enough to fully express the shadow area in Harry's heart at this time. Looking at the door that was slammed by Harry, Julian said, "Oh, young people nowadays, why don't they like to hear people finish their sentences? They are still too impatient." After that, Julian put on a sad expression on his face and went to sleep. Nothing wrong, just went to sleep. It was dusk when Julian woke up again. Julian yawned and got off the bed, and murmured, "It seems that I can't cultivate immortality until it's too late. What is immortality? Why did I always say some weird things recently?" Then I went downstairs to eat liao, and after eating, I devoted myself to cultivating immortals again. Ah bah, it is the career of cultivation, and the rest of the days passed in this reciprocating cycle, until the beginning of school. One night, Tom said he was going to hold a farewell party for him, and Julian must come down to attend. At 7 p.m. Julian came downstairs on time, looked at the packed bar and thought, "I'm still welcome," until he saw the sign and it said, "Congratulations Julian, full go to Hogwarts, off to school," and under the big print there's a small print that says, "We're free," or something like that. Looking at this slogan, Julian was full of MMP wanting to say it. The drinkers noticed that Julian came down, and everyone greeted Julian warmly, and then cried about how much they missed Julian and so on. But if it wasn't for the slogan, maybe Julian would have believed what these fools said. In 2 months, Julian has formed a deep friendship with these drinkers who drink and talk all day long, which can be seen from listening to their conversations. "Boy Julian, you're finally going to school. You must go to Hufflepuff College. It's a paradise there. Our dormitory is the closest to the school kitchen. I was a famous big eater in the college, ha 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 ha." A big fat man weighing more than 300 kilograms yelled at Julian. Looking at Eden, who was as fat as a ball, Julian suddenly had a chill, and silently vowed not to go to Hufflepuff even if he didn't go to school. It was really a horrible paradise. "Eden, stop bragging. Who doesn't know that Hufflepuff Academy is a bunch of idiots? Ah, ha 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 ha. I think Julian should enter our Gryffindor Academy. Julian is angry at the Malfoy family. How handsome he is, you say, isn't that right?" A strong man who looked like a fitness trainer shouted loudly. "Hey, why do you have to go to Gryffindor after you beat the Malfoys? And Hayden, you are a wizard, why do you have such a muscular body? I'm afraid you have some misunderstanding about the word wizard." Julian murmured to himself. "Hayden, you fart, why are our Hufflepuffs useless? You still have the nerve to call us, aren't you Gryffindor just a bunch of ignorant rough people, huh?" "Ha ha ha," Eden retorted. The people in the bar quickly divided into 2 groups. One group supported Julian going to Hufflepuff, and the other group advocated Julian going to Gryffindor. As for why no one proposed to go to Ravenclaw and Slytherin, please think about it carefully. Ravenclaw people are known for their wisdom and elegance. How could they appear in such a dark and dilapidated small bar? The unshamming Gryffindor stayed in the same place. The whole 7 years of hatred at Hogwarts made most Slytherins and Gryffindors look like their respective father-killing enemies, and the enemies were extremely jealous when they met, which was no joke. And this hatred has been well carried over to the next generation, which has caused the students of Slytherin and Gryffindor to hate each other from the time they enter school to graduation, and even after working as adults. The farewell party continued, and no one of the 2 groups could convince the other in the end, and finally developed into a wine fight between the 2 groups to decide Julian's belonging. Looking at the people who were drinking more and more high, Julian said helplessly, "Didn't you say it was my farewell party? Why did this group of people drink high for no reason? That's what they like. A group of drunkards, they have no other way to celebrate besides drinking," Tom said with a smile on the sidelines. As for why he laughed, he could tell by looking at the wine bottles all over the floor. "Hey, they are your benefactors, your gods, is it really okay for you to say that?" Julian said speechlessly. "First of all, those drunks who are drunk can't hear our conversation at all. Secondly, you must know that the wizarding world does not believe in God, we believe in Merlin." The swelled Tom didn't notice that the sound of drinking over there had stopped, and the whole bar only Tom's voice echoed. Then, of course, it goes without saying that Tom, who was outraged by the public, was dragged into the drinking party, and was crazily drunk by the people above him. He was really drunk. Hayden used his thick arm that caught up with Julian. One was tightly wrapped around Tom's neck, and the other was holding a large bucket of wine and pouring it into Tom's mouth. Poor Tom couldn't find his way out within a few minutes. "It won't kill anyone," Julian said softly. "Amen," when he saw the drunken unconscious Tom was still being sipped by Hayden, and continued to fight for his food. The farewell party is still going on, but there are very few people who are still awake. The farewell party lasted until the wee hours of the morning and ended with the last person passed out. Looking at the drunks in a bar, these people are drinking like this because of themselves. Julian was very moved, which is weird, and then got up and went upstairs to sleep. Just kidding. School starts tomorrow. If he wakes up late tomorrow, should he go to Hogwarts on foot, it will kill people. Imagine spending a few days and nights to finally arrive at Hogwarts, but being rejected because he did not attend the opening ceremony. What kind of scene would it be? And Harry and Draco. Malfoy laughed, and was sure to be laughed at. Thinking of this, Julian felt a chill. In order not to be ridiculed by those two little fools, Julian reluctantly threw all the people in the bar there and ignored them. It was definitely not because of the slogan, but because school starts tomorrow, and I have to go to bed early. Thinking of this, Julian fell asleep with peace of mind. In the dream, Julian seemed to return to the grassland again, and then nothing happened. The next day, the people who stayed at the Leaky Cauldron due to drunkenness last night gradually sobered up and left. The bar owner Tom was sent to St. Mungo's Magic Injury Hospital because of alcoholism and alcohol poisoning. The therapist there said that if he was sent later, Tom's life would not be guaranteed. Well, congratulations, let us congratulate Boss Tom who survived and escaped. Well, it is said that Hayden has never been to the Leaky Cauldron since then. As for our Julian, let's turn our attention to the bed in a certain room on the second floor. At this time, Julian is already awake, but his expression is dull, looking at the alarm clock on the bedside table stupidly. The alarm clock, it is doing its job conscientiously, and the time displayed on the alarm clock is also very interesting, 10:30. What a wonderful time this is. Looking at the time indicated by the hands on the alarm clock, it's late again, Julian thought flatly in his heart. Suddenly Julian seemed to come back to his senses and shivered all over, because it suddenly occurred to him that today seemed to be the day when school started, and according to Tom, the Hogwarts Express seemed to leave on time at 11 o'clock. Julian jumped off the bed in a jerk, washed his face indiscriminately, tidied his clothes, and rushed out with his suitcase. He rushed out of the bar gate to say hello to other people who hadn't come all the way. After running for a while, Julian found that he was almost exhausted just because he was lazy. No, we can't run like this, there is no time. Julian suddenly seemed to think of something. Julian turned around and ran back to the Leaky Cauldron. Julian came to McGee, the only waiter at the Leaky Cauldron, and yelled under the inexplicable stares of the others. "McGee, you said you passed your apparition exam, right?" Confused by Julian's cry, McGee nodded blankly as if he hadn't figured out the situation yet. "That's good. Come on, take me to King's Cross Station, I'm going to miss the express train to Hogwarts soon," Julian said eagerly. "Okay, grab my clothes." McGee, who understood why Julian was in such a hurry, drew out his wand without saying anything, and waited for Julian to come over. After Julian grabbed him, McGee said uneasy, "Must hold on tightly." After finishing speaking, after confirming that Julian was indeed clinging to his clothes, McGee performed apparition, and brought Julian to the women's toilet at King's Cross Station. Julian, who hadn't figured out the situation, thanked McGee, and McGee hurried back. After all, with Tom in the hospital, McGee was alone in the Leaky Cauldron. Just when Julian was about to open the toilet door to go out, the toilet door was suddenly opened, and a little girl with thick brown shawl, curly hair, a pink hat, and brown eyes walked in. Hit Julian with an armful. Both Julian and the girl were clearly stunned. Seeing that the girl was about to yell loudly, Julian, with sharp eyesight and quick hands, covered the girl's mouth with one hand, and quickly locked the door behind him with the other hand. "Hermione, it's me, Julian Willis, we met in Diagon Alley, remember?" Seeing Hermione nodded, Julian covered Hermione's mouth and whispered, "I let go of your mouth, don't make noise." Hermione's eyes were red, and she nodded as if frightened. Julian, who let go of Hermione, looked at Hermione nervously, afraid that Hermione would suddenly yell, and then he would be finished. Although he could use the blood eye to deal with the aftermath, there was still something wrong. "Why are you here? This is the women's room." Hermione gently pushed Julian away, and said dissatisfied in a low voice, "Well," there seemed to be a hint of shyness in her dissatisfaction. "After all, this is a women's toilet." Hermione, who is only 11 years old, is not as nervous as Julian, and she can meet a friend of the opposite gender in the toilet calmly. "I'll explain it to you on the train. I'm going out first. It's not a good idea to stay here." After finishing speaking, Julian pushed the door open a little bit, observed the situation outside, and after making sure that there was no one outside, Julian took off Hermione's hat, put it on and said to Hermione, "Lend me the hat first," and then flushed out of the toilet. All that was left was a red-faced Hermione stomping her feet in the toilet angrily, swearing by perverts and scoundrels over and over again. Fortunately, the location of this toilet is relatively hidden, so that Julian is not exposed. Julian, who was pulling the suitcase, walked quickly to the platform and looked at the clock on the platform, 10:45. Well, it's not too late. Julian dragged his suitcase to look for the 9 3/4 station. When he got to platform 8, Julian found that there were a few red-haired people standing next to a pillar on platform 9 near platform 10. It was quite spectacular from a distance, like a Bosozoku gathering. Julian ran over quickly, calling as he ran, "Mrs. Weasley, Harry, wait for me." The Weasley family and Harry, who heard the sound, turned their heads one after another, and laughed out loud when they saw Julian trotting over with a suitcase, and counted the twin brothers laughing exaggeratedly, because this scene looked so joyful, especially Yuri. Ann also wore Hermione's pink hat in order to get away with it, and she looked extraordinarily funny. "Well, what are you laughing at?" Looking at the Weasley family and Harry, who were laughing and dying, Julian asked in a daze. "Little Julian, your hat has character," the twin brothers said in unison. Immediately, everyone laughed more happily. If the conditions were not allowed, Julian had no doubt that the twins would roll on the ground a few times. After reacting, Julian quickly took off the pink hat on his head, stuffed it into his pocket indiscriminately, and then said with a smile, "It shouldn't be that exaggerated, isn't it just a hat?" By the end Julian's voice was almost silent, and he obviously figured out how funny it was to run with this hat on. Julian's reaction obviously made the Weasley brothers laugh even harder, and they almost couldn't stand upright. Harry even walked up to Julian, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "I didn't expect you to be this Julian. Don't worry, everyone has the right to choose what he likes, and I won't laugh at you." After saying that, Harry, just like the twins, I couldn't straighten up laughing. Looking at Julian in embarrassment, Harry really let out a sigh of anger when he was slapped by Julian in the leaky cauldron. In the end, it was Mrs. Weasley who came out and said that it was almost time for everyone to stand first. Julian looked at Mrs. Weasley as if he were an angel. Everyone walked through the wall one by one to the real platform 9 3/4. Looking at the red steam locomotive in front of Julian and the wizards around him, Julian felt as if he had passed through the wall of time and space. Like Julian, Harry was also shocked by the sight in front of him. Harry, who was born as a modern person, never imagined that he would have the opportunity to see such an ancient steam locomotive. Everyone said goodbye to Mrs. Weasley and Ginny one by one, and got on the train. Percy went to the prefect car because she was a prefect. The twin brothers went to find their classmates. It is said that their classmates got some good stuff. As for what the good stuff was, Julian didn't ask, but he could guess that it wasn't a good stuff. So it was left with Julian and Ronald and Harry, and the three walked all the way back to find an empty box. After finding an empty box, the three of them sat in with their luggage. Not long after the three sat in, Harry asked, "By the way, Julian, whose hat did you wear at the station? It's not like you really have a hobby for this." Harry shrank back as he spoke, as if Julian would pounce on him the next moment. Julian looked at Harry and Ronald, who were laughing again, spread his hands helplessly, and then reached into his pocket, ready to explain to the two, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find Hermione's pink hat. Julian's cold sweat came down instantly. "I won't lose it." The unbelieving Julian took out his wand and shouted, "The hat is flying," over and over again. After shouting for a while, Julian was finally sure that he had lost Hermione's hat, and he was going to die. Harry and Ronald, who didn't know why, looked at the neurotic Julian, and then shook their heads, leaving him alone. At this moment, the door of the private room was pushed open, and a smiling witch pushed the snack trolley and asked the three of them, "Would you like something to eat?" "No, I brought it myself." Ronald blushed and took out the sandwich in his hand. "I'll have some," Harry and Julian said at the same time, and they both pulled out a handful of galleons at the same time. After Harry and Julian came in carrying a lot of snacks at the same time, Ronald stared at them with wide eyes and exclaimed, "Have you both emptied the cart?" The two piled the snacks in their arms on the empty seat, and then said to Ronald, "You're welcome, come and eat some, we can't finish it by ourselves." Ronald took out the sandwich made by Mrs. Weasley again, and muttered, "No, thank you, I have my own sandwich, but my mother seems to be confused again, I don't like corned beef." Ronald's voice gradually faded until Harry and Julian couldn't hear what he was saying after that. Julian picked up a large piece of pumpkin pie and stuffed it into Ronald's hand, then snatched the corned beef sandwich from Ronald's hand, and said to Ronald, "I like corned beef. Since you don't like it, let's change it. I don't like pumpkin pie either." "Well, it smells delicious. Is this made by Mrs. Weasley?" "It tastes really good," Julian said, biting the sandwich in his hand. "To be honest, Mrs. Weasley's workmanship is really good. As a standard housewife, Mrs. Weasley is obviously like a coyote, and her housekeeping skills have reached X. In the country of Ying, which is full of dark cuisine, Mrs. Weasley's cuisine is obviously among the top batch. Not only does it taste good, but it also has a taste of home in it, a feeling that directly hits people's hearts." Seeing Julian gobbled it up, Ronald was stunned. Harry had seen Julian eating, so he wasn't as surprised as Ronald. "You do like corned beef, and I thought that was something only old people would eat." "Well, I'm not a picky eater. I eat almost everything except pumpkin. If you don't like it, it's because you haven't experienced the feeling of being hungry. After all, there are not so many delicious foods in the orphanage." "Not bad, but Mrs. Weasley's craftsmanship is really good. I really envy you for having a mother with such a good craftsmanship," Julian said to the two of them nonchalantly. "My God, Julian, you're..." The word, orphan, didn't come out, but Ronald was clearly taken aback. Harry, like Ronald, was shocked and speechless by the news. Harry didn't expect that Julian, who seemed so optimistic and cheerful, was actually an orphan. "Anyway, I still have my aunt and uncle, although they are not very good to me, but at least I have relatives." But Julian. The atmosphere in the box suddenly fell silent. The three of them were quietly eating what was in their hands, and no one was talking. The wheat field outside the window kept speeding backwards, and the sound of sirens ran through the entire wheat field, as if silently mourning Julian's misfortune. The silence in the box was broken by the door opening after a while, and the three looked up at the door instantly. Malfoy, who was stared at by the three of them, couldn't help taking a step back, bumping into the bodies of his followers, Brack and Goyle. Malfoy, who felt that he had bumped into someone, reacted instantly, "By the way, I brought a helper, and I came to find fault. This is the Hogwarts Express, he must not dare to do anything to me." Malfoy, who was thinking of this in his heart, instantly swelled up, very swollen, very swollen. "You dirty..." Malfoy was frightened by Julian's eyes before he finished speaking, and he was so frightened that he didn't dare to say the following words. Looking at the cowardly Malfoy, Harry and Ronald laughed instantly, like two fat men over 300 kilograms. Seeing the laughter of the two, Malfoy instantly became angry. He didn't even care about his fear, and started to mock at Ronald. He didn't dare to mock Julian, and he didn't dare to mock Harry as the savior. "Looking at your red hair, you must belong to the Weasley family. Your family must have sold everything to get you school materials, you purebred scum. How dare you?" Looking at Ronald, who was blushing more and more because of Malfoy's words, Harry wanted to step forward and punch Malfoy, but Julian pulled him to sit down before he could finish his sentence. "Julian." Harry looked at Julian with a surprised face, and thought to himself, "No, this doesn't look like Julian." Just when Harry was still wondering, Malfoy, who had been watching Julian's actions all the time, noticed Julian pulling Harry's actions and thought to himself, he really didn't dare to do it, and then laughed even more. If Julian dares to make a move, he will dare to hide behind Brock and Goyle. "Well, it's perfect, pretending to be yourself. Come on, brother, I'm such a clever little ghost. You see, Julian agrees with me. Harry, Julian is the real smart guy. Come on, join me, and I'll show you who you should really get close to. And who you should stay away from of." After speaking, Malfoy still gave Ronald a contemptuous look. Ronald, who was born with low self-esteem, blushed even more after hearing Malfoy's words. The redness almost caught up with his hair. "Finished, Malfoy." Julian stood up and looked at the smug Malfoy. And Malfoy obviously didn't realize the seriousness of the problem, and he said cheerfully, of course, Julian, I'm done, you can talk." "First of all, Malfoy, I don't think wealth is the only criterion for measuring a person's worth. Some people are poor, but their souls are kind and noble, just like the Weasley family. Your soul is as filthy as a rat in the sewer, as is your family, Malfoy. How dare you? Before Malfoy finished speaking, Julian waved his hand, and Malfoy immediately hid behind Brock and Goyle in fright. Seeing the cowardly Malfoys, Julian was speechless. Am I so scary? Ignoring Malfoy's actions, Julian continued, one more thing, Malfoy, who gave you the courage to come here to mock my friend, Liang Jinggru, or these two trash? After finishing speaking, Julian drew out his wand and pointed at the three of Malfoy. Malfoy, who saw Julian's movements, froze instantly, and said in horror, you can't do this, you will be punished. Sorry, I'm under 11 years old. With a playful smile, Julian slammed, Shenluo Tianzhong, on Clark and Goyle. It's called Shenluo Tianzhong, but it's just pushing the armor body out. As for how Julian knew about Shenluo Tianzhong, he can pass through it. It seems that there is nothing wrong with knowing Shenluo Tianzhong. The fat bodies of Clark and Goyle were pressed against Malfoy's body. Poor Malfoy wanted to use them as meat shields, but he never thought of being their flesh pads. Panicked, Malfoy hurriedly pushed away the two people who were pressing on him, and ran away, without even saying harsh words, just ran away so simply. Crabbe and Goyle also hurriedly stood up and ran with Malfoy. Seeing the three of them in a panic, Harry and Ronald laughed together. Just when Julian was about to put away his wand and continue eating and drinking, a voice suddenly came from behind him, Julian, you are so majestic. It was originally a compliment, but there was a feeling of resentment coming out of the mouth of the original person. Hearing this voice, Julian's body froze for an instant, turned his head slowly, and said with a pitiful face, Hermione, what a coincidence, you also take this bus. There was no trace of domineering that just taught Malfoy. What a coincidence, am I taking this bus? Don't you have any clues in your mind? Showing off your cuteness, selling your sister's cuteness, don't you know it's shameful to be cute? By the way, how much is your cuteness per caddy? No, now shouldn't it be criticizing the fool? Hermione blushed more and more as she thought about it. Come out with me, Neville's toad is lost, come find it with me. Glancing at Harry and Ronald in the box, he dragged Julian out. Harry and Ronald were left alone with shocked faces. You must know that this is the great demon King Julian, who can punch the Malfoy family and kick elite Aurors. What is the origin of this girl who can make Julian grow up like this? Demon King, it must not be easy to show such an expression. With gratitude to Julian for driving away Malfoy's gang, awe of the girl named Hermione, and sympathy for Julian, Harry and Ronald continued happily to eliminate the snacks in the private room and eat. It's very cheerful. By the way, when is Julian's birthday, Harry, do you know? Ronald asked as he continued to stuff the chocolate cake into his mouth while eating. I don't know, but Julian beat the Malfoys once in Diagon Alley on the grounds that he was under 11 years old, said Harry, who also stuffed chocolate cake into his mouth. Like, Blue Monster, Malfoy hurt Julian so much. Ronald replied inarticulately. By the way, Ronald, do you know who Liang Jinggru is, a famous wizard? Harry asked. Well, it seems that the Western wizarding world has never heard of a famous wizard named Liang Jinggru, and judging by the name, it should be a wizard in the Eastern wizarding world. Ronald swallowed the food in his mouth reluctantly and replied. Is there a wizarding world in the East? Harry asked in surprise. Of course, but the other party doesn't seem to be called a wizard, it seems to be called a Taoist priest, or something. I heard from my father that wizards in the East seem to live a long life, but my father doesn't know the specifics, because the Ministry of Magic has no established diplomatic relations with the wizarding community over there. Oh, that Julian is really amazing, he even knows about wizards in the Eastern wizarding world. Harry exclaimed. Well, maybe Julian heard it from somewhere. Ronald replied, but he agreed with Harry's words in his heart. Julian is indeed very good, and he must thank him if he finds a chance. Ronald, who secretly made up his mind, continued to ask Harry. Mouth stuffed with food. The atmosphere in the private room soon became cheerful. Listening to Harry telling how Julian taught the Malfoy family a lesson, Ronald and Harry were as happy as two chirping sparrows in the private room. This joy until Julian came back with a slap on his face. Seeing the slap marks on Julian's face, Harry and Ronald laughed even harder. The laughter continued until the horn on the train said that the station would arrive in 5 minutes. And what can Julian do? Of course he chooses to forgive these two little idiots. In other words, after Julian was dragged out of the compartment by Hermione, Hermione kept dragging her to the rear compartment. The further he went, the fewer people were in the compartment until the last compartment. There were not many people in the last compartment, only a few couples were here. Hermione dragged Julian to find a box, and let go of Julian after entering. "Sit down," Hermione said sternly. After hearing the order, Julian sat down quickly, and looked at the obviously unhappy Hermione like a good baby. "Explain, you have at least 2 points to explain," Hermione said with her arms crossed and her legs crossed. "Well, it's quite a queen's posture," Julian joked on the surface, but in his heart, he said, "I won't be found out, I lost her hat." "What did you say?" Hermione asked blushing, speaking and making a gesture to punch Julian. Seeing Hermione's raised slap, Julian hesitated instantly, raised both hands in front of him. Well, just kidding, you have to be a lady, you can't be like those coquettish sluts outside, you will get old quickly if you get angry at every turn. By the way, Hermione, you are very nicely dressed today, it's really nice." Looking at Hermione, who was wearing a wizard robe in front of her, her delicate little face was blushing. This dress, this small face, this age crossed out the last one as simply a top-quality Lolita. Julian thought while looking at the little girl in front of him, constantly suppressing his eager heart. "Oh no, it's the feeling of heartbeat, so I turned out to be a lolicon. No, I must be scared." At this moment Julian panicked, but still looked at Hermione with a smile on his face. As for Hermione, hearing Julian's ridicule and praise, her face turned even redder. Both of them were silent at this moment. Hermione looked at Julian with a blushing face, and Julian looked at Hermione with a guilty face. This girl wouldn't see anything. At this time, a young boy's voice came from outside the box door. "I'll go, are all the children so open now? They're meeting here at such a young age. It seems that the age is still in the 1st grade, a primary school student, a school girl, Shang Xian is an adult. Bow your head." After the boy finished speaking, he heard a man and a woman laughing from outside. Julian and Hermione looked up and saw a couple with their arms around each other looking at them. Hermione blushed even more thoroughly. Looking at the blushing Hermione, the girl in the couple, she pulled the boy and said, "Don't bother people, make out, let's go Paul." "Okay, Maureen, let's go, I'm going to talk to the animals we sleep in, and hit them hard." Ha ha ha. As the couple left, the atmosphere in the box instantly became ambiguous, and the air seemed to be filled with pink. Seeing that the atmosphere was gradually developing in an uncontrollable direction, Julian quickly opened his mouth to control the atmosphere. "Then let me explain to you, but why do I need to explain 2 things?" Hearing Julian's words, Hermione immediately returned to normal and said, "Then I'm nervous to explain. If you don't understand the explanation, you won't be able to go to Hogwarts alive. As for why it's 2 o'clock, don't you have any idea?" Looking at Hermione recovering, Julian took a deep breath and began to explain. "So Julian, you deserve to be single. Well, I'm in the women's room because I got up late this morning and had McGee at the Leaky Cauldron. Apparate, me here, because McGee just passed his exams, so his apparate shape may not be very proficient, and the transmission was a little off, which led to us appearing in the women's restroom." After Julian said that, he looked at Hermione cautiously, and said embarrassedly, "Well, this explanation can be regarded as you're muddling through. What about the next explanation?" "So, dear Hermione, what's the next explanation? You have to give me a head start, I'm in a daze right now." Julian said guiltily. Okay, let me remind you, does my head look good?" Hermione obviously flustered. "Well, it's pretty good, what's the problem?" Julian asked, pretending to be silly. Hearing Julian's answer, Hermione blushed and stepped down to show respect. "Wrong answer." Hermione blushed and stared at Julian. "Julian, where is my hat? Give me my hat back." "Well," Julian said with a sigh, "since you found out, I won't hide it from you. When I escaped from the toilet, I met a crying little girl. I asked her why she was crying, and she saying she lost her hat. I asked her what color her hat was and she said it was pink, so to coax her I gave her your hat." "Really, Julian, so you are so caring, I'm impressed with you." Hermione said bluntly. So, dear Julian, can you explain to me what's going on with this hat I'm holding, huh? Hermione's tone rose suddenly. Ah, that. Julian looked at the pink hat in Hermione's hand and hesitated for words. That what? You said it, you didn't tell me, this is the hat that the little girl lost. Hermione said with a mocking expression. Julian's eyes lit up, and he said, yes, you're right, Hermione is like that, you're so smart, this is probably the hat that the little girl dropped. Julian, do you think I'm stupid, think my IQ is not online, I saw this hat fall out of your pocket with my own eyes, you still want to quibble, why don't you die, you fool? With a snap, Hermione slapped Julian across the face, got up and opened the door and went out, leaving Julian with a dazed expression on his face, as if he had lost his soul. Julian, who had returned to his box in a daze, hadn't recovered yet. Harry and Ronald looked at the slap marks on Julian's face and laughed, ha ha ha. As the express train continued to move forward, the sky outside gradually darkened. After getting out of the car, the three followed the crowd and walked forward together, when they suddenly heard a rough voice, follow me, first-year freshman. Hagrid, Harry exclaimed in surprise. Good evening, Harry, oh, and Julian. Good evening, Hagrid, Julian replied, and then whispered to a stunned Ronald, Hagrid is the warden of the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts, and I suspect he may be of giant blood. I agree, Ronald whispered back. Hagrid looked at the first-year freshmen who followed him to the lake, and shouted, everyone get on the boat, each boat can only accommodate 4 people. Then he took the lead in getting on a boat. The children followed Hagrid's example and boarded the boat. The three of Julian and the boat became Julian, Harry and Ronald. It is said that there are murlocs in this lake, Ronald said looking at the dark lake. Mermaid, is it the kind from a fairy tale? Harry asked curiously. Harry is a murloc, not a mermaid, make no mistake. Julian reminded. Is there any difference between them? Harry asked curiously. Are you a curious baby? Julian complained, but still gave Harry an answer, the murloc is ugly, while the mermaid is beautiful. This should be the most intuitive difference. The mermaid's singing is beautiful, but the murloc's voice is hoarse. It's ugly, but whether it's a mermaid or a murloc, they all eat people. Eating people. Ronald and Harry, who had put their hands on the lake, stretched them back quickly. However, the murlocs here are safe. It is said that they have an agreement with Professor Dumbledore that they cannot harm the students here. Julian added. The boat slid for a while, and just before reaching the cliff, Hagrid yelled, head down. Passing through the cave, all the boats came to the shore, and the little wizards got off the boat and looked at the gate in front of them, all exclaiming. Is this Hogwarts? My life is about to start from here. Julian sighed and followed the crowd towards the gate. Everyone went to the gate, and Hagrid knocked on the gate with his casserole-sized fist. The door opened quickly, and a black-haired witch in a green robe stood in front of the door with a serious expression. When Julian saw it, he immediately thought of the housekeeper of their orphanage, who always had a serious look every day, and sometimes even beat people with his hands, but usually Julian used the blood wheel to fool him. This professor is not easy to deal with, Julian thought to himself. Freshman, Professor McGonagall, Hagrid said loudly. Okay, Hagrid, thank you, you go back to the hall. Professor McGonagall's voice was as serious as her appearance. Professor McGonagall waved his wand, and the door opened even wider. The foyer was huge, big enough to fit in the orphanage where Julian grew up. The little wizards followed Professor McGonagall into the gate, until they came to a gate. Welcome to Hogwarts. The start of term banquet is about to begin, but before you get seated, there will be a sorting ceremony first. There are 4 houses in Hogwarts, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin. The sorting ceremony is very important. It will determine your life at school for the next 7 years, because the college is like your home during your 7 years at school. You have to go to class with your classmates, live in the dormitory, live together, etc. Don't do anything that violates the rules, it will deduct points for your college, and if you perform well, it will also give you extra points for your college. At the end of the year, if your house has the highest score, you will receive the House Cup, which is your highest honor at Hogwarts. I hope that no matter which house you enter, you will give your house a prize. Honor. The sorting ceremony will be held behind the door in a while, and I will come in to pick you up later. I hope you will take this time to sort out your mental state and your appearance. I think you don't want to leave a mark in the eyes of the professors. Impression it. After speaking, Professor McGonagall pushed the door open and entered the hall, leaving behind a bunch of little wizards staring. Tell me, how will they be divided into colleges? Will they take the exam? Will they fail? And if they fail, will they have to go home? Harry asked nervously. I heard from Fred and George that it seems that some kind of test needs to be done that will hurt us a lot. If we fail, it is said that we will be disabled. Ronald replied. The little wizards around who heard the conversation between Harry and Ronald all showed nervous expressions, and Julian even noticed that Hermione started reciting spells in a low voice. Even the proud Malfoy was pale. Obviously he had not obtained any information about the sorting ceremony from his family. Julian, what do you say? You read so many books, you must have information about the sorting ceremony. Harry looked at Julian hopefully. Julian shook his head and said, Indeed, I have read a lot of historical facts about Hogwarts, but the strange thing is that there is no book about the sorting ceremony. Not a single one, and even many autobiographical memories are just a passing, so I don't have any useful information here. Oh, why is this? You don't even know Julian. I hope I won't be too ugly by then. If I just go back to my aunt's house like this, how they will laugh at me. Harry said dejectedly. Looking at the depressed Harry, Julian said, Although I didn't get any information about the sorting ceremony, but through other words, I am sure that the sorting ceremony will not be too difficult, because it is mentioned in the book, Hogwarts Past. In Hogwarts there are no more than 10 cases of expulsion of students in history. The most recent case was more than 50 years ago, and they were all expelled because of major violations of school regulations and caused irreparable situations. At most, you will be repeated instead of expelled. So your worries are unnecessary, Harry. After hearing Julian's explanation, Harry's mood stabilized a lot. After a while, Professor McGonagall came back, and she said to the little wizards, Line up in a single row, and whoever I say will sit on the high stool and put on the sorting hat, and the sorting hat will put you assigned to the appropriate academy, and follow me now. After finishing speaking, Professor McGonagall led the young wizards into the hall. The Hall of Hogwarts is very large and full of the atmosphere of the age, but it doesn't look very old, but has a quaint feeling. The ceiling of the hall faithfully shows the weather outside. Looking up, the stars on the ceiling are shining brightly, as if you were outside. When Julian entered the hall, he first saw the row of seats at the front of the hall, which should be the professor's seat, because Julian saw Dumbledore in the middle, and Dumbledore also looked at him. Julian nodded to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore nodded back with a smile. After the little wizard stopped and stood up, Professor McGonagall took out a high stool and an old hat. The hat was very old, really old, as if it was sewn from pieces of cloth. Professor McGonagall put his hat on the stool and stepped back. Just as Professor McGonagall backed away, the hat suddenly twisted, a slit opened from the brim like a mouth, and he began to sing. You read that right, the broken hat sang. Julian was stunned, and felt that the scene in front of him was so weird. After the sorting hat sang, Julian still hadn't recovered. He had been wondering whether he should put this weird hat on his head. Just when Julian was struggling, Harry was soon assigned, and he heard Professor McGonagall calling Harry's name. Julian quickly regained consciousness, gave Harry an encouraging look, and watched Harry go to the execution ground crossed out. Harry put on the sorting hat in front of everyone's eyes, and the sorting hat suddenly exclaimed, making Professor McGonagall take a step back in fright. After the sorting hat gave Harry a burst of commercial praise, Harry resisted the temptation and resolutely chose Gryffindor. Following Harry's step down, Ronald arrived in a short while, and fortunately Ronald was also assigned to Gryffindor. Then, Julian Willis, Professor McGonagall called out. As if resigned to his fate, Julian stepped forward. Julian put on the sorting hat. Smelling the stench from the sorting hat, Julian couldn't stop feeling sick. Ah! Came a louder exclamation than when Harry put it on, and Professor McGonagall managed to be startled again by the sorting hat. Afterwards, the sorting hat exclaimed in a voice that could be heard by everyone in the audience, What a pure blood! It's the first time I've seen a pure blood with such a pure blood in so many years. There is no doubt that you should go to Slytherin. It is no exaggeration for the Uchiha clan to inherit the blood of Otsutsuki Kagaya to say that they have inherited the blood of God. When the sorting hat praised him for his pure blood, Julian felt bad for a while, and immediately thought, "Don't go to Slytherin, don't go to Slytherin, go to Gryffindor, go to Gryffindor." However, Julian's words didn't work. Julian suspected that the Sorting Hat knew that he thought it stinks and deliberately retaliated against him, and the Sorting Hat assigned Julian to Slytherin without hesitation. Julian stood up and took off his hat. Looking at the greasy old hat in front of him, Julian twitched and asked Professor McGonagall helplessly, "Professor McGonagall, has this hat been cleaned?" Huh. Professor McGonagall was obviously stunned by Julian's question, but he didn't react for a while. Hogwarts has been established for 1,000 years, and Julian was the first to ask such a question during the sorting ceremony. Julian took Professor McGonagall's reaction as default. Then he silently pulled out his wand, and with the horrified expression on the Sorting Hat's face, the ghost knows why a hat can make such an expression. Julian went up and directed at the Sorting Hat, "Clear water like a spring." Julian controlled it very well, wrapped the Sorting Hat in a water polo and kept spinning. The transparent and clean water polo turned yellow in a short while. Think about it, assuming that the Sorting Hat has not been washed for more than 1,000 years, and is worn by so many little wizards every year, the oil on the hat. Julian changed the water wave after wave, and finally the water polo was no longer a disgusting tan, but returned to a clean and transparent color. Clean it up. After finishing the last action, Julian put away his wand, looked at the stunned Professor McGonagall, and said with a knowing smile, "I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, I'm not yet 11 years old, my magic power just ran away accidentally, please forgive me." Then, without waiting for Professor McGonagall's reaction, he picked up the Sorting Hat again, which was on its high feet and looked limp, and placed it on his head. Smelling the scent of freshly washed cloth from the Sorting Hat, Julian nodded in satisfaction. This time before Julian could say anything, the Sorting Hat shouted, "Gryffindor, again." Julian under the hat nodded in satisfaction, took off his hat, bowed slightly to the professor's seat, and walked off the stage. The whole hall fell into silence. Julian walked slowly to Gryffindor's long table and sat in the place Ronald and Harry had reserved for him. It wasn't until then that everyone realized what the first-year little wizard had done, and suddenly there was applause, and the little wizards in the hall saw Dumbledore sitting in the middle of the professor's chair, applauding. Immediately, everyone applauded together, especially Harry and Ronald, who blushed with excitement. "You are so cool, brother. You are the first person to change the decision of the Sorting Hat since Hogwarts was founded, and your actions will definitely be recorded in the history of the school," Ronald said excitedly. The applause lasted for a long time, until Dumbledore stretched out his hands and pressed it, and the little wizards excitedly stopped applauding. "Excellent, clear water, I couldn't have done it better, Mr. Worries, but it's a pity it's the back-to-school party, otherwise I'd be giving Gryffindor a 10. You've done what I wanted to do for 10 years but failed to do." "Albus, you can't." Professor McGonagall stopped Dumbledore before he could finish. Of course, Mr. Worries, we still don't advocate this. After all, we have to respect the Sorting Hat. After all, he is much older than us, isn't he?" Dumbledore said with a wink at Julian. "Yes, I know, Professor Dumbledore, I will apologize to the Sorting Hat next time I see him." After all, Julian did an ancient aristocratic etiquette, gestured to Dumbledore, and then sat down. "Well, the Uchiha clan is a noble in Konoha, and Itachi, the eldest son of the patriarch, must have been trained in this regard. Welcome old students back to the big Hogwarts family, and welcome new students to this big family. We will spend this wonderful campus time together in the days to come. Of course, if you want to be as good as Mr. Worries, I think you must study hard, and one last thing to say, idiot, cry, scum, twist. Now let's enjoy your dinner." As soon as Dumbledore finished speaking, the originally empty table was instantly filled with a pile of delicious food. Looking at the delicious food in front of Julian, Julian said that fortunately, there are not only English dishes, but if it is only British food, Julian said that he might only eat bread for the next 7 years. Seeing Ronald and Harry gobbling up on both sides, Julian also joined the ranks of grabbing food. It's delicious. By the way, Julian, you look very familiar with Professor Dumbledore, have you met before?" Harry asked inarticulately. "Oh, of course we do. Harry and we both grew up in the Muggle world. You were brought to the Leaky Cauldron by Hagrid. I'm similar to you, except I was brought to the Leaky Cauldron by Professor Dumbledore." Julian said nonchalantly while continuing to stuff the grilled chicken leg into his mouth. PFF'd, Ronald spit out when he heard Julian's words, and asked in surprise, "You were led into the leaky cauldron by Professor Dumbledore?" "Yeah, what's the matter? There's no fuss," Julian continued to say nonchalantly. "That's right, Ronald, what's the big deal?" Harry asked strangely. Although he thought it was a little surprising that the headmaster himself picked him up, it shouldn't be so unbelievable. Seeing Ronald's expression as if the world was about to with a devastated expression, Harry felt that Ronald was exaggerating. "No, that's not it, Harry. You and Julian grew up in the Muggle world, so you don't really know about it. Professor Dumbledore hasn't been a guide for quite a few years. It's been 50 years since he became headmaster. For many years, you are the only one in the past 50 years." Ronald said seriously. "You may be Professor Dumbledore's chosen disciple," Ronald said excitedly. "You're making a big fuss, Ronald. You see, even Hagrid was sent out to find Harry. Maybe Hogwarts recruited too many Muggle students this year, and there aren't enough professors in the college. Besides, even if Professor Dumbledore was looking for an apprentice, why would he let Harry the Savior not accept him, and accept me, an unknown kid?" Julian said flatly. "You are not an unknown boy, buddy. Hogwarts has been established for thousands of years, and you are the first person who dared to do such a thing in the sorting ceremony. And do you have any special qualities? Dumbledore must know. Since Dumbledore chose you, he must have a reason," Ronald said enviously. "You think too much, eat quickly," Julian said vaguely. "Ah!" Suddenly Harry screamed, and then covered his scar. "Harry, what's the matter with you?" Julian looked at Harry and asked. "For some reason, the scar on my forehead suddenly hurts," Harry replied weakly. Julian looked around, and suddenly he saw a professor on the professor's chair looking towards them. His gaze was actually sizing up Harry faintly. This professor's sight Julian is very familiar with, because in the previous life, his younger brother looked at him with this kind of eyes. It was a kind of hatred eyes, but there was a trace of love in this hatred eyes. This had made Julian a bit unbelievable. "I'm afraid it's not that the professor is a little schizophrenic. How could someone's eyes be full of such complicated and extreme two emotions, and they still look at the same person? Also, since Harry has been living in the Muggle world, he shouldn't have any entanglements with professors in the Wizarding world, which is too unmagical." The professor seemed to have noticed something. His eyes were no longer looking at Harry, but turned to him, and the look at him was much simpler, only disgust. Julian didn't know how he offended him, but the other "It's the professor," so Julian actively retracted his gaze. After a while, Julian felt his vision disappear, so he raised his head to observe the professor's seat again. Julian observed that a professor wearing a turban seemed to have some problems, because when Julian looked at the back of his head, he faintly felt as if someone was watching him, just like the professor also had a pair of eyes staring at him at the back of his head. As if aware of something, the professor suddenly turned his head and looked this way, as if he wanted to find the person who was looking at him just now. Julian feels that there is something wrong with this professor, but Julian is not very clear about the problem. "Percy, who are the two professors sitting over there?" Julian asked Percy, who was sitting across from him. "Oh, you said those two. They are Professor Snape and Professor Lodge. They taught us potions and defense against the dark arts respectively. Professor Snape is very strict. No one has ever seen him smile. He's still head of Slytherin House. As for Professor Quirrell, he is kind but stutters," Patsy replied. Well, now Julian knew why Professor Snape was looking at him in disgust. After all, he had just slapped him in the face. After everyone finished eating, Dumbledore stood up, and then said to everyone in the hall, "I have a few words to say after eating and drinking. First of all, entering the Forbidden Forest is forbidden. There are many things you have to deal with. There is no beast, and the corridor on the 4th floor is forbidden to enter this year. If you don't want to die tragically, you'd better not try it. Finally, let's sing our school song together." After all, with a wave of his wand, a passage of lyrics appeared in the hall, and Julian noticed that Professor Snape's face was a bit ugly. Finally Dumbledore shouted, "You must always remember our school motto, do not disturb the sleeping dragon." The last 4 words were shouted by everyone present. After shouting the school motto, everyone returned to their dormitories under the leadership of the prefects of each college. Gryffindor's dormitory was on the 8th floor of the Gryffindor Tower, and everyone climbed up to the 8th floor with difficulty, mainly because they were full. They followed Percy into the lounge, and entered the dormitory under Percy's arrangement. Then everyone played around in the dormitory for a while and fell asleep one after another. In the dream, Julian came to the grassland again. The unicorn was still standing there, and the familiar voice was still there, but this time it was different. Come on, come, find me, I'm waiting for you. In the dream, Julian tried desperately to hear the content of the voice, but he couldn't hear clearly. In the end, Julian could only give up and continue to sleep. Early the next morning, Julian woke up and began to think about the dream last night. He kept saying that it was not the time. When he arrived at Hogwarts, it became, come and find me. I can't get rid of the relationship. Maybe it's in the Forbidden Forest. I should find some time to go to the Forbidden Forest to have a look. As for what Dumbledore said, the Forbidden Forest was very dangerous and students were not allowed to go there privately. Julian just smiled and said nothing. Don't make trouble. Even the Weasley brothers don't know how many times they have completed the task of 7 in and 7 out of the Forbidden Forest, let alone him who is comparable to an elite wizard, and besides, he still has blood eyes, which cannot be defeated. You can run away. Julian rubbed his eyes, got up with a yawn, woke up Harry and Ronald who were still asleep, and Julian dragged himself into the common room. The common room is a place where both boys and girls can stay, and it is a bridge connecting the male and female dormitories. Thinking of this, Julian thought of the ridiculous rules of Hogwarts. Boys are not allowed to enter the girls' dormitory, and girls can come and go from the boys' dormitory at will. Are you sure you're not prettiest? Hey, I'm going to flip the table, really flipped. No matter how angry Julian is, the rules will not change, so congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. Looking at Hermione, who was seriously preparing the textbooks at the desk, Julian expressed that he didn't understand why Hermione was so serious. Books are something, isn't it something that can be remembered after reading it once? Well, Julian with blood eyes is so swollen. Thinking so, Julian came to Hermione's side, sat down next to Hermione, smelling the smell from Lolita's body. Well, it's really fragrant. Good morning, Hermione, what are you looking at, so serious? Julian asked casually. Hearing voices suddenly coming from her side, Hermione was obviously unprepared, and subconsciously hid to the side, but Hermione ignored that this was a single sofa, and there wasn't much space, so Julian sat on the armrests on both sides of the sofa. Hermione, who was about to dodge to the side, was about to fall to the ground as soon as she couldn't sit still, but Julian, with quick eyesight and quick hands, grabbed Hermione's hand and pulled her towards him, and he sat down on the cushion of the sofa superior. The two of them were next to each other as if they were a couple. Hermione didn't seem to recover from the shock for a while, and was grabbed by Julian just like that. At this time, a frivolous voice came, "You see, buddy, these are the two little guys." What Maureen and I saw are these two little guys. Julian and Hermione looked up at the same time, and saw 4 senior boys standing in front of them, starting with the boy from the couple that Julian and Hermione met on the train. Julian remembered that he seemed to be called Paul. Good morning, seniors, Julian greeted. Hermione was still on hold. Good morning, little guy, your name is Julian, right? You were so cool last night. You must be the first person to do this without getting punished since the school was founded. If it were me, I guess I would have been locked up. Why, are you dating your little girlfriend? The common room is not a good place for a date. Do you need a senior to introduce you to some good places for a date, so that no one will disturb you? Paul said enthusiastically. Hearing the words, little girlfriend, and date, Hermione seemed to have just come to her senses, and threw out a slap, straight to Julian's face. Then he put away the books on the table, said, "Goodbye, pervert," and left, apparently going to have breakfast. No need now, senior. Julian smiled wryly. Paul smiled awkwardly and said, "It seems so." Then he ran away with his little friends. Before Harry and Ronald got down, Julian threw, healed as ever, on his face. After Harry and Ronald came down, the 3 of them went to the cafeteria together. With superb eyesight and memory, Julian smoothly brought Harry and Ronald to the hall for breakfast. When they got to the hall, they found that many people were already having breakfast in the hall. When the 3 of them sat down, 3 empty plates and 3 empty glasses appeared in front of them. Julian was the first to say to the empty plate and glass, "Fried eggs and fried bacon, a glass of warm milk." Plates and glasses appeared instantly with what Julian had ordered. Ronald and Harry ordered their own breakfast as Julian did, and ate. At this time, there was a burst of discussion behind the three of them. "See that boy." "Which one?" "It's the one on the left with the red hair. Look at the scar on his forehead. He is Harry Potter." "So did you see the one on the right with the red hair?" "What's wrong with that? What were you doing during the sorting ceremony yesterday, Fugue?" The other boy smiled embarrassedly and said, "I was really distracted during the sorting ceremony yesterday. When I realized it, everyone was already applauding, and then they started eating again. I didn't have time to ask." "I really admire you. That boy is the one who changed the will of the sorting hat." "Oh, you're talking about him." The conversation behind them continued until the three of them had finished eating. Obviously, the three of them hadn't realized that their troubles had just begun. In the next few weeks, no matter where Julian and the three are, there will always be many curious little wizards around them, sometimes when the three of them eat, sometimes when the three of them are in the library, sometimes even in the when the three of them went to the bathroom. It wasn't until a few weeks later that the little wizard's curiosity dissipated a lot. The three of them returned to normal life. Of course, it's all for later. The three of them who had breakfast walked slowly to the Transfiguration classroom under the leadership of Julian. When the three of them arrived at the Transfiguration classroom, there was no one in the classroom, only a tabby cat was sitting on the podium, so the three of them chose a seat by the window. Looking at the tabby cat on the podium, Julian smiled and put on the contact lenses that had been prepared, and then used the blood wheel eyes to observe the cat in front of him. "I checked that the soft contact lenses were made in 1964. It was invented in 1991, so the technology of contact lenses should basically take shape. The animagus technique is really miraculous. There is no flaw in my blood circle, as if it is a real cat. If the pattern next to the cat's eye is the same as that of Professor McGonagall's glasses, I would have believed it." Then Julian asked Professor McGonagall, "Professor McGonagall, if I start practicing animagus from now on, how long will it take?" "Julian, why are you crazy? Professor McGonagall hasn't come yet," Ronald said to Julian in surprise. Even Harry looked at Julian in amazement, then nodded, obviously agreeing with Ronald's words. Julian ignored the two, but kept staring at the tabby cat on the desk. Harry and Ronald looked at Julian, who had been staring at the tabby cat on the desk and ignoring them, so they also stared at the tabby cat on the desk together with Julian. After a while, as if giving up, the tabby jumped up from the desk and gradually transformed into Professor McGonagall in the air. Wow! Looking at Professor McGonagall in front of them, Harry and Ronald were obviously stunned. "Mr. Willis, how did you figure out that I was the cat?" McGonagall looked at Julian with a smile on his face. "Oh, Professor McGonagall, I once read about animagus in a book, so I know that wizards will retain some of their own physical characteristics when they become animagus. Your tabby has patterns next to the eyes that are the same pattern as your glasses, so I'm making some wild guesses. Turns out, obviously, I guessed right." Julian watched Professor McGonagall return with a smile on his face. "Very careful observation. Very bold guess. I think I should give Gryffindor 10 points." Professor McGonagall's smile became more obvious. "Mr. Willis, since you have read the information about animagus, I think you should know that animagus not only requires the practitioner to have a profound knowledge base of transfiguration. There must also be a detailed magic power control ability, and a large amount of magic power foundation. Based on your performance at the sorting ceremony, I think you only have the ability to control magic power in one of the 3 items that meets the requirements. The accumulation of magical power takes time, and I think, Mr. Willis, you need to wait until the 5th grade before you can learn animagus," said Professor McGonagall. "I don't think it will take that long, Professor McGonagall. Someone gave me a bottle of enchantment potion before school started. My magic power has reached the level of an adult wizard. Professor Dumbledore can prove this. I was in his the magic enhancement potion taken under the guardianship," Julian said confidently. Looking at the confident Julian in front of him, Professor McGonagall was stunned for a moment, and then said, "You can stay after class, Mr. Woolies, I think we can have a good talk." After finishing speaking, Professor McGonagall ignored Julian and turned to go to the podium. because at this time, the little wizards had already walked in one by one. After sitting down, Julian was immediately questioned by Ronald and Harry. "Professor McGonagall, what is that magic? Can we learn that magic called ashes?" Ronald asked excitedly, and Harry also looked at Julian with interest. "It's animagus, Ronald, but this technique is too early for you. You have also heard what Professor McGonagall said. It requires very strict conditions. Even the simplest magic power requirements cannot be met by you. By chance, I got a bottle of magic potion to achieve the magic power it needs, so you should wait until the 5th grade. Honestly, after class, I will talk to you in detail later in the dormitory." Julian finished, then he opened the textbook. Reluctantly, Ronald and Harry could only open their textbooks and prepare for class. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.